And we're going live. We're live. Hello, Joseph. Howdy, sir. Just getting myself organised there when I saw your wee comment there. Nice to see you, Joseph. You keeping well? And thanks for everybody else for joining us tonight. We're on to chapter 6 of the book club of Dune. And this is quite a good wee chapter. I'm looking forward to it, actually. It's quite short. But we finally get to meet Leto Atreides, who's been continually getting hyped for us there. Throughout the first 5 chapters, all we do is hear about Leto and how wonderful and how brilliant he is, and also the fact that he's pretty much doomed. So there we go. There's Chaya saying, Shalom, you all. Shalom, Chaya. How are you keeping? Well, thanks for joining us. We're just getting started tonight. It's a nasty old night here, I have to say. Very cold, very wet. Oh dear, just miserable day. So it's nice to be indoors, put it that way, and doing this. So we'll get going with chapter 6, shall we? As I said, this is the one where we get to meet Leto, and I must grab a couple of wee things before we get started. I bet you I've moved it, haven't I? We'll have a wee chat about Leto and Greek mythology and who Leto is. And there's Brad saying, good morning, good people. Good morning, Brad. How's it going in Oz? Snowy and cold here as well, says Joseph. Yeah, it's still winter, isn't it? It's very much a wintry day. I think we're meant to get some ice after midnight tonight. So we're all just talking about how miserable it is here, Brad. But it's probably nice and sunny where you're at, I have no doubt. But good morning to you anyway. I hope you're keeping well. Brad, whenever we were chatting the last time, very quickly, we were talking about J.G. Ballard's books, and I was going, I couldn't find them, and they're right on the shelf, right there. The book that I couldn't remember the name of is because it has a different name. Hang on. So yeah, it was the Drowned World, the Crystal World. The third of those, the other one of those 3 was called The Drought. Just because it was something we were having a wee chat about the other day, and I couldn't find those books anywhere. I was looking high and low, and they were sitting right up there the whole time. China's saying a big storm is starting here now too. Oh, yeah, it's just the weather, isn't it? I suppose it's a good day for the house. I have to say. And saying that we've got the heating on and so on, it's nice and cozy in here tonight. But just been up and had quite a sort of active wee day out and about. Took my wife for lunch today and just got out a wee bit, but it's just been so grey. It's not a great day. There's Cynthia saying hello, and there's Peter Zydek saying, Kulwahad, this channel is great. Thank you very much, Peter. It's a bit. It's a good day for a book read, absolutely. It's and I say after we're offline, I'm sure, it would be. I'm reading... I'm reading, oh goodness, what do we call it? The Demolished Man at the minute, and working away at these, annotating this Dune Book Club, which I'm enjoying. But I'm really, it does take a wee bit of my reading time up, and I have to say I'm really enjoying getting back into Alfred Bester. And my episode's a wee bit delayed, but we'll have it for you next week on Tiger. Just been a busy week, actually, Such is life. What exactly does Kulwahad translate to in English? I believe it is I am profoundly stirred. I believe something like that. It's I think Kulwahad is one of those ones that's in the back of the book. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Try not to cough into the microphone. Kulwahad. It's quite a good one, I think. But I wonder, does it have a proper analog in Arabic or something like that? Where are we? Kulwahad, I am profoundly stirred. The sincere exclamation of surprise common in the Imperium. Strict interpretation depends on context. It is said of Muad'Dib that once he watched a desert hawk chick emerge from its shell and whispered, Kulwahad. There you go. That's the wee bit in the back of the book. There we are. Neat, who says Joseph. And it's nice and overcast here, better than this mid-30s centigrade here at the start of the week. Goodness, that would melt us here, I think, I have to say. I often find it quite funny, some of the extremes of temperature about the planet and types of weather, but I think we've been talking about the Californians and having a bit of a hard time with the rain. And I was just wondering what on earth would they do if they ever came to Ireland. It does nothing but rain here, all the time. So many shades of rain. But let's get started, shall we? It's nice everybody saying hello and stuff. I have to say, and thank you all for joining us. So, as usual, each chapter of Dune begins with an epigraph, and as usual, in the first book, they're all by Princess Irulan, I'm pretty sure. Excuse me. And this one's from Muad'Dib Family Commentaries. And again, if you think about the way, I think, yeah, there we go. I think we'd had a wee chat about Frank kind of wanting to educate you, but not wanting to do it straight to your face, basically. Yeah, sorry, I was going to look something, just a wee nosy there. I think I read it before, but it was just basically about him saying he doesn't want to really tell, do the work for you. Almost everything that we've been getting so far has been presented in one form of a lesson or another. And we've been slowly meeting all of these people that are supposed to have been tutoring Paul. And of course, his parents are included in that, but we've had Leto set up so much. Excuse me, a little bit froggy throat today. Chaya's saying I've got hail and thunder and the internet keeps cutting it. That's hateful, and that does that, Chaya, I have to say. There we go. Let me see. Sorry, just going to close this wee door here. A bit of movement outside, and we'll get cracking. Right, there we go. Time to settle and get on. Okay, folks. Right. So, of course, let's read the epigraph to start with. How do we approach the study of Muad'Dib's father? A man of surpassing warmth and surprising coldness was the Duke Leto Atreides. Yet many facts open the way to this Duke. His abiding love for his Bene Gesserit lady, the dreams he held for his son, the devotion with which men served him. You see him there, a man snared by destiny, a lonely figure with his light dimmed behind the glory of his son. Still, one must ask, what is the son but an extension of the father? And in this case, it's a very good point here, I suppose. And there's even, to a degree, a little bit of religious context to that kind of thing. The sins of the father, the sins of the son, that kind of nonsense. Excuse me. But in this case, it's going to be quite interesting. And I think this chapter tells us more about... We don't really learn too much about Leto, I think, in this. But we get a sense of the man, I suppose. And what we do actually get more of in chapter 6 here is actually a little bit more info in the background of the universe, and particularly the economics and the power plays, if you like. And we actually kind of get to see what the Atreides are up to. So, interestingly, some of the things that we're told about them, they're surpassing warmth, yet surprising coldness. They're kind of almost opposites in that sense. He can be warm, but he can be really cold. And as I said, we're told the facts about him. Love for his Bene Gesserit, the dreams he held for his son. And it's interesting, if you're thinking about this from the Muad'Dib family commentaries by Princess Irulan, she says, you see him there, a man snared by destiny. And we're always with Irulan's work, we have to ask the question, how much propaganda is there? And how much is it history and inquiry, if you like, and how much of it is factual? Because the one thing that we do know, as I said, we'll find out a wee bit, is that the Atreides do propaganda better than anyone. And we almost see, as we get through this chapter, we'll almost see Leto do it with his own son and kind of stop himself from doing it, if you see what I mean. Excuse me. So we're back in the same training room that we've had several encounters with Paul in, where he's been meeting his various tutors, etc., Dr. Yui, Thufir, Gurney. At this point, and so it's getting a bit. This scene is familiar to us, if you like, and we'll see little elements of that. That the L tables here and the skylight that was discussed previously is, I think, quite important here. But so yeah, we're kind of almost getting familiar with the Atreides and their settings. And of course, the next chapter we're going to be completely uprooted, just like Paul and his family, and we'll be in Arrakis in the next chapter. So the first thing that we can really sort of get a sense of with Leto, um, I suppose the first little comment is we often talk about how different characters enter the room. Um, Engine, their movement, etc., is kind of indicative of their character a little bit. And of course, Paul watched his father enter the room. The guards take up stations outside. One of them closes the door, and we don't really get that sense with Leto at all. But we're going to get a good description of him. And as I said in the previous chapter, the description of Dr. Yui was very comprehensive compared to some characters. We don't get that much fleshing out of visual detail, but we're going to get a fair bit about Leto here as well. And the first thing that we're kind of told about is that, and it's an interesting phrase, as always. So this is always the case. Paul has a sense of presence in his father, and he describes it as someone who's totally here. So we have to assume that Leto has either a real sense of gravitas about him or is very charismatic, but he's simply a person that you feel them in the room. If you know what I mean, you just go, oh, who's that? They stick out in a way, and I get that sense from that. But and of course, as we go through this, what is the son but an extension of the father? We must remember this bit, because we get, so if Paul should be, if we want to know a bit about Paul, really, Paul Muad'Dib, let's take a look at Leto. That should tell us a lot. So straight off, we get a bunch of physical description to the Duke, and we'll just run through it. He's tall, olive-skinned, has a thin face with harsh angles. The coldness of his face is warmed by deep grey eyes. He wears a black working uniform with a red armorial hawk crest at his breast. He has a silver shield belt with a patina of much use. I love that word. Patina is a great word. And he has a narrow waist. So there's his physical description. We get a little bit more as well, that he's tired. So I suppose one of the things, there's an awful lot of commentary about skin color within the Dune universe. And as much as we've talked about, there are no characters are described in terms of white. Very few characters are described in terms of their skin color. They're often more described as they were dark, if you know what I mean. They have a dark face about them, this kind of thing. And I think we had Gurney described that way previously. But it's more like a dark set to the person, this kind of thing. So here we actually have an olive-skinned individual. And well, if we look to the father, then we should maybe think that Paul is olive-skinned. I think there's a particular cover for Dune Messiah. It's the French cover, and I don't know the artist, I'm afraid. I've used it in a few of the episodes, and it kind of Paul is drawn like that, I think. And the olive skin is within that picture, I think, is a kind of blackish skin with a hint of green, if you know what I mean. And I often thought that was and it's probably my favorite. Yeah, really, it's Paul as Emperor. It's a really, really good drawing. Sorry, piece of art. And I don't know if anybody's seen this one, but it is a French edition of Dune Messiah. Check out that cover. I said I've used it a few times in the videos. So that's the description of Leto. Whether Paul is, in all things like his father, is not a given. But it's a thing that a lot of people jump on for some reason, and I think it's a bit silly. All of this stuff. If a character is described a certain way, that's how the character is described by the author. So yeah, the description of him is he's angular, he's harsh, if you know what I mean. The straight lines. And it says it's warmed by his deep grey eyes, but the sense of warmth is in the eyes, but the rest of the body the rest of the face certainly angled, this kind of thing. And it kind of matches his surprising warmth, surpassing coldness, if you see what I mean. So he's finally here to see his son. I'm sure Paul must be delighted, because he's been looking for his dad for quite some time. Excuse me. And I think we were told in the previous chapter. Let me just check this. I think. Oh, hang on. Maybe it's another one way back. Yeah, chapter 4, the epigraph was just, of course, Duke Leto, whose qualities as a father have long been overlooked. And we can maybe consider some of his qualities as a father. Often that's the way I like to look at him, to be honest with you. But we should get a sense that first of all, I mean, as much as he's head of a military house, this man is a military individual. He wears a uniform. And he'll talk about his soldiers. Soldiers enter with him. He's protected by soldiers. And almost immediately, he's sort of hard at work, son. It's all work, no play. Not how you do, and or anything like that. How's your, but his behaviour as he goes into the room. Duke said, "Hard at work, son," and he crossed to the L table, glanced at the papers on it, swept his gaze around the room, and back to Paul. And we get this that he felt tired with the ache of not showing his fatigue. And I think that's quite interesting. The little things that I just sort of thinking, and again, I don't know if you agree with me on this, and feel free to chip in with any comments, is that I get a sense of paranoia about Leto. As much as Gurney's checked this room already, if we remember. There's been a masseuse in, Paul's been massaged, but Paul hasn't left the room. And he's arrived with a small cadre of soldiers, probably his personal bodyguard, and he's still checking the room, I think. He's glancing, and it's, I don't know, I've put paranoid question mark, and I would argue probably not in this universe, just common sense, maybe because assassination and deadly dealings, etc., are all part of the general nature of the Dune universe, I suppose. It's a very violent place. So just the wee point there, tired, the ache of not showing his fatigue, that's all about appearances. He's actually focused on not showing he's tired. The idea of, I suppose, commanders not showing weakness to their men, this kind of thing. But everything about this guy, I think, is appearances. And I don't know. Maybe as we go on, I actually don't consider Leto Leto the First in a particularly positive light, and we'll have a wee chat why. But in terms of his intellectual chops when it comes to politics, I don't think he's smart. And it's within the context of the book, I suppose, but within the context of the real world, the whole thing everything that he does, but what he does to his family and his son, I think, is kind of maybe reprehensible as a parent. And I wonder why Irulan says in that epigraph in chapter 4, his qualities have long been overlooked as a parent. She didn't bother to go on and describe them. And that's possibly for propaganda, because the epigraphs that we're reading are being written when Paul is emperor. And I do consider every epigraph by Irulan to be Atreides propaganda. Force of habit, yeah. I made a wee note. Is this paranoia because the room's already been checked? But yeah, developing habits, this kind of thing. I've been kind of brought up that way, by the way. So, as a little kid, I was trained to search for bombs under my dad's car. So, this kind of thing, and it was the reason why I was taught this is basically that if there's a bomb under your car, little kids running into the car first thing in the morning for school, boom. Whereas, of course, so from about the age of, God, what school is that? From the age of 9, I was taught to check for bombs under and around the car, and I wouldn't get into the car until that had been done. And at a certain point, we got a 3-light warning system which you can have mounted on your car, which basically tells you if, depending on how the lights work, a range of things, whether somebody's been tampering with your locks, there's a device attached to the vehicle, there's a magnetic device on the vehicle, this kind of thing. And then you run away and get the bombs. So I kind of understand that kind of habit. And so when I wrote paranoid question mark, And as you said, Brad, no, it's the right force of habit, but it's the right thing for this universe. It's being sensible, I think. Mm. But yeah, and we get this. We do get a little bit of his inner monologue here, not too much. But I must use every opportunity to rest during the crossing to Arrakis. He thought there'll be no rest on Arrakis. Excuse me. And again, the words there, tired, fatigue, etc. And we should consider this as being a bit of a strain, I think. We're going to get a little bit more fleshed out for us within this chapter. Of course, Paul admits that he hasn't been working very hard. And what I quite like about the next few, but everything's so, and there's still a bit of Paul that's a teenager here, I think. Everything's so, and we get a little bit, just the continuation from, and it's just to fit into our timeline. We're leaving tomorrow. So it's still the same day as the practice with Gurney and the chat with Dr. Yui, etc., etc. And of course, he says it'll be good to get settled in our new home, put all this upset behind. Oh, right. There we go. And of course, this causes Paul to remember Paul nodded, suddenly overcome by the memory of the Reverend Mother's words, for the Father nothing. And this wee point, Father Paul said, will Arrakis be as dangerous as everyone says? And we'll get to it in a wee second, but this sense that something's been done to Paul by the Reverend Mother. And we'll see how that plays out for him in a wee second. Brad says that is not normal for there. That was because of your father's job, right? No, I would say even within that, just my dad was smart about it. I think it's normal for me. Here working on farms, you always check for snakes and spiders. Yeah, and I imagine you check your loo as well. Chaya Rivka says Leto seems cautious and controlled, always on for those around him, but still naive about what's really happening and overconfident in himself. Yeah, that's a good analysis, Chaya. We'll see that in a wee bit actually when we get. I think the real telling of the tale with Leto is kind of how he sees himself within the Landsrad. And it kind of reminds me of Paul's response to the Bene Gesserit. You take a lot on upon yourselves, that response, and it's a kind of similar thing from Leto. But no, Brad, I suppose, I don't know, it depends on how no, it's not normal for that. It's very normal for me back then, and it just became a daily thing. Up until pretty much I was old enough to drive, I think. But yeah, I don't. I put it this way: I moved around an awful lot, Brad. So it's not that I could compare and contrast with other kids, to be honest with you, but that was part of it as well. Was lying about who you were. So I can kind of understand that mentality. It's something I despise, to be honest with you, now, because I've got my own son, and I, don't want to pass on all of that stuff that was forced off on me because of, quite frankly, the state and my dad's profession. Nothing to do with me. Still doesn't. But there you go. It is understandable. Some people have to live with security like that, I think. So yeah, let's see. Where do we get to? So for the Father nothing, and of course Paul's questions, as he sort of, two tutors, and of course his father's considered one of his teachers, often pull out the information that we need to get to help us understand that we're getting a lot of setup, a lot of world building, and we're also getting a lot of interaction between these characters. And we're dealing with them one or two at a time, and it allows Herbert to sort of flesh them out a bit and build up his world around. The story before we head off to Arrakis, we'll have most of the major players, most of the political agencies, and a lot of the key planets, for example, talked about. And we'll have we should have a reasonable understanding of how the political tripod within this universe works. And of course, excuse me, will Arrakis be as dangerous as everyone says? This is the little bit here, I think. Um, the Duke, let me just catch up with let me find this on my little, there we are. Do. So he forced himself to a casual gesture and smiled. And I think, remember, that language with the Gaius Hal Mohim was repeated before, where she forced the smile or something. Forced the kindness, I think it was. Excuse me. And Paul's question is it all going to be as bad as everyone says? And he sits down at the table, smiles, and here we go. The really important word here, I think, is pattern. A whole pattern of conversation welled up in his mind, the kind of thing he might use to dispel the vapors in his men before a battle. The pattern froze before it could be vocalized, confronted by the single thought, "This is my son." So I think the pattern here. Excuse me. One of the things that I think is interesting about the idea of a pattern within Leto is that patterns make people predictable, I suppose. It's another thing you're told, Brad. Alter your change your pattern every day, if you know what I mean. Don't go home the same way twice. This kind of thing. So yeah, it's and of course this falsity, this pattern of conversation. You could argue this kind of thing is rhetoric, if you like, but it's more likely to be what we would call sophistry, I suppose. What he would use with his men, anything to get them to do what he wants, basically. And the suggestion is there that this is the sort of thing he would do with his men before a battle. Was suggest that he's been in battle before, as has his men. Now let's have a wee look. So, and of course, the whole pattern of conversation. These patterns, they're pre-prepared, and this is one that he uses to deal with his men before a battle. And again, there's always the nature of propaganda and control, I think, with Leto. Well, we must have a wee chat about, at some point before we finish, we must have a wee chat about Leto in relation to Greek mythology, because it's quite important, because the role of Leto as father is a gender inversion, and how Leto Leto's quite an interesting character in terms of worship in the ancient world. Is seldom worshipped on her own, but usually as a mother figure to the divine twins Artemis and Apollo. Yeah, and of course, if we'll have a wee chat, I'll talk a wee bit briefly about Queen Nyobe of Thebes. Depending on which version you read, Nyobe, all tears, and her 7 sons and 7 daughters. And this is a very well-known story, actually, in Greek mythology, but Niobe compares her children to Leto's children, Artemis and Apollo, and both Artemis and Leto sends her children to slaughter the whole lot of them. One of them survives, which I think is Chloris, I believe, one of the girls. So as much as she's associated with motherhood, Artemis and Apollo were often out slaying people with their poisoned arrows, etc. So yeah, she's a half and half, I suppose. She can be seen as quite a benevolent goddess, and she can be seen as quite nasty, I think. But associated with motherhood, I suppose, and of course, being associated with her children, there's an association also with prophecy, with Apollo and the hunt and the moon, etc. And of course, sun god, moon god, really. So the fact that he's named Leto, and as I said, it's another one of these gender inversions within names, particularly, that exists an awful lot in Dune. And fascinating. If you want to check out what happens to Niobe in the end, is that her grief is so bad that depending on which version of the myth, either she turns to stone herself, or else the gods turn her to stone because they're sick of her crying, and because of the death of all of her children, and the stone that she's turned into still weeps. And if you look up, I think it Mount Sipylus. You have a look on Wikipedia. You should see the rock formation that's meant to be Nyobe. So that, again, there's a kind of a real life thing. Oh, that's Nyobe. That's meant to be her that was turned to stone. If you see it, and it's all tied into the Tantalus myth, etc. as well. But there we go. Cynthia saying agreed regarding Leto's naivety, especially when he dismisses the Bene Gesserit as women's fears and love instead of recognizing their power and influence. We're just about to get to that, actually. I think he's. I think, well, again, it's the universe, but he displays behavior which you would call wildly sexist in our modern day world. And it's which actually raises some questions, and it's in this chapter actually. He's an interesting character because we're always told, "Oh, isn't he amazing? Isn't he brilliant? Oh, everybody respects him so much." But he takes his entire people to their deaths, basically, including his child. Of course, Paul doesn't go to his death, but the point is he's taking his family, his household, his partner, all of his most trusted people, and he's moving them to Arrakis permanently, which will, have life-changing consequences, really, for everyone if they're going to stay there for any given time. Excuse me. And it depends on, we're going to talk about turning your son into a killer, turning your son into a drug addict. These kind of things are essentially, and he's grooming Paul for a position. And I think it's something you don't see in the new film. I think that they've changed that relationship. So let's have a wee look. Patterns are important in Dune, and particularly reiterative patterns. And I think we'll have a wee look at different ones as they turn up, actually. But it's a wee thing. Certain words I think are worth paying attention to within the Dune series. So of course, is it going to be that bad? And instead of bullshitting Paul the way he would bullshit his men, he tells him, it's going to be dangerous. It will be pretty bad. And of course, Paul's still really wanting to talk to his father about what Gaius Helen Mohim has said to him. For the father, nothing, all of this. And we get to see Paul trying to speak it. Pardon me. But Paul ends up saying, "Howard tells me we have a plan for the Fremen," Paul said. Pardon me. And he wondered, why don't I tell him about what the old woman said? How did she seal my tongue? And the interesting thing is that Paul's distress, but we're getting it secondhand from the Duke, noting his son's distress. I'm probably not getting it at all. It's another one of these where something's wrong here. I'm pretty sure what it is, but it's probably not what he thinks. And of course, Paul's question there, how did she seal my tongue, is a good question. How did she do this? What's been done to Paul? How has the, and if we're fully aware of kind of the conversation with the Reverend Mother in place, etc., how has Paul had? I think with the same things done to Fade Routha. And there's a key word, and it's a subliminal command. And if he hears it, I think at the very end, it's a means of Paul defeating Fade. That the Bene Gesserit have implanted one of these suggestions or something. And I suppose it's also a bit like the Sook conditioning. We don't have the details, if you see what I mean. We're not quite sure what it entails. But how has Paul been? How has this been done to him? When we've been kind of watching it, and it's suggestive it may have been planted by someone else, I think. Possibly his mother. That may be something the Bene Gesserit encourage others to see so they can maintain their secret power, but it goes against the way the Bene Gesserit are actually described, maintaining such control of themselves. Yes, the fundamental thing about the Bene Gesserit is they want to be in the background. I think actually in terms of the Kwisatz Haderach, I've often described it that if the Kwisatz Haderach has a weapon, really, and they want to wield it, but you want to be behind it. If you see what I mean, everything in front of it. And I suppose ultimately that's why they aim for the throne, that they intend to put the Kwisatz Haderach, whoever it may be, on the throne, and then the Bene Gesserit will control that. It's an age-old political thing that the people at the head often get targeted. If you like, you're better to be behind the scenes and milking it all, if you know what I mean. It's very much a part of modern politics. Put a lot of countries are putting a stooge, if you like. We've got one. I don't think he's going to last too long. And Northern Ireland's First Minister, who's unelected, has just resigned. And he's a stooge too. It's what everybody's milking around the corner, if you know what I mean. The guy in charge is the guy that you pay attention to. Let's look at him while we do all this kind of thing. That's it. Trump, in some ways, could be considered an excellent diverter of attention, couldn't he? You wonder what everybody else was up to while you're all wondering about Trump. So he notes his distress. We've got this question, and it's a good question. How did Gaius Halmoheim do that? And I don't think I don't know personally, but I don't think she had the opportunity. I think it may have been implanted, whatever it is, possibly from Jessica. But it's one of the things we'll not know, I suppose. Paul's able to break this, as we'll see in a wee minute. But here we go, and we start to get our where are we? Number 14. We start to get a little bit of a lesson about Chom, and also the plan, if you like. And we get a wee quick description of Chom: Combine Honet Ober Advancer Mercantilis, the Chom Company. And what we find out, and of course, sorry, I've just skipped ahead a wee bit. It was about Leto noting the distress in Paul, admitting it's dangerous, and we get another question from Paul: how it tells me we have a plan for the Fremen. Well, it's a statement, really, but he's trying to say something else here, I think. So, let me see, where's the wee bit I was looking for? It's, yeah, as always, how it sees the main chance, that's the wee bit we're looking for. And the main chance, I thought that was an interesting way of putting it. And is it a particular possibility of how things will go? So but there's much more, and here we go. This is the gist of it. I see also the Combine Honet Ober Advancer Mercantilis, the Chom Company. By giving me Arrakis, His Majesty is forced to give us a Chom directorship, and he sees this as a subtle gain. Excuse me. And here we get the economics of the Dune universe. Chom controls the spice, Paul said. And Arrakis, with its spice, is our avenue into Chom. And there's more to Chom than melange. Excuse me. So the subtle gain that they're after here is wealth, I think. Chaya says, Reverend, let me just catch up with your comments a wee second, folks. Chaya says, Reverend Mother warns Jessica that if she shields her son too much, he won't grow to fulfill any destiny. That's correct. Howard and Jessica shield Leto too much. Chaya says, Paul said he was focusing on the cadence of Reverend Mother's words at one point, rather than the words themselves. Maybe it was some kind of hypnotic thing. Very good. Yes, that's it. As I said, the devil is in the detail, isn't it? Excellent, Chaya. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, these little tones and stuff and shadings and things that can kind of potter about a bit there. That the voice works in a certain way. It's probably something quite subliminal within the tone in the voice. Because because it kind of makes you wonder, how did they get it? How did they do it to fade as well? But I'm pretty sure that that's Casimir Fenrig's wife, Margot. I'm pretty sure she does it. Then I think it's mentioned at the back. We'll get there again. Excuse me, I've got such a tickly throat. I'm going to put the coffee down and grab me juice here and see if that helps a bit. I'm only after a spicy stir fry. Now, Chom, subtle gain. A subtle gain is a Chom company directorship. This is about wealth and money. Of course, Chom controls the spice, is what we're being told by Paul, and Arrakis with its spice is our avenue into Chom. There's more to Chom than melange. Excuse me. So, Combine Honnet Ober Advancer Mercantilis. That's an interesting little name, and it's got at least 3 languages in it. It's got English, French, and German, doesn't it? Combine Honnet is honest, over the advancement of goods, if you like. So it's a cooperative, a cooperative that honestly shifts all sorts of goods. That's what and so the fact that you have to call yourself honest, I think, is not a very good sign, I suppose. And we finally get this blurt out from Paul. And whatever it is that Gaius Helmut has done to him, as he keeps saying, what has this woman done to me? He seems to blurt something out here. And it's almost a bit of a shift, but did the Reverend Mother warn you? Paul blurted. He clenched his fists, feeling his palms slippery with perspiration. The effort it had taken to ask that question. And I've actually put down, is the statement that he's made sufficiently vague to get past any kind of specific block that, for example, you can't tell your father for the father nothing? And of course, the Reverend Mother's we were told previously that everybody's warned Duke Leto about this, though how obviously we're not too sure. And I was just wondering, but it takes real effort to whatever it is he's been trying to break, I suppose. And I've actually written down, just at this point, I've written down that this part of the book doesn't flow well. Let me see. She's frightened you, number 17. How it tells me she's frightened you. From there, really, where am I thinking? Just through to the where this must be Levin, though he is young. I just don't think the writing flows very well here. It's there's something not quite bang on about it. I'm not sure. I can't really say what it is, to be honest. But I got a wee sense of the back and forward between Paul and Leto is not flowing as naturally as it should. If you know what I mean. If our author has done his job correctly. Lord Crunk says, I'm late. Hello, Lord Crunk. Not to worry. There's no timetable here, so thanks very much for joining us. Brad Rosen, honest. Maybe it's like countries with the word democratic in their name. Well, it depends on what democratic means. Kratos. So a deme has lots of different meanings. But you could take it as meaning the people. In Athens, it was to do with the city divided into demes, which is a division of 10. And Kratos is the personification of force. So the force of the people. Power is often how it's translated, but force is democracy. And Democratic Republic of China, Democratic Republic of Korea, this kind of thing. It is one of those things. I'd argue it's the same as, well, the great that's in Great Britain is just to do with the size of greater or lesser, the two islands. But of course, Britain loves to call itself great, which often kind of points out that it's not, I think. But yeah, and a good one for you, Brad, is that for example, when we talk about Greek democracy, we're really talking about Athenian democracy, and what they had is not what a modern democracy is. A modern democracy is not a democracy in that sense. If you vote for someone and then give them your power, that's a representative democracy, but it's not what they had. The yeah, it's what's called isonomia. There you go. Isonomia, and I'm totally into it. They didn't have it proper, but if they had, see, for example, women were excluded, foreigners were excluded, but isonomia is the concept of equal law, and that's how Athens is meant to work. Basically, that you don't vote for someone to go and then represent you in government. You are your government. You have a turn, and you get chosen each day. X amount of people of your population are picked. You're given a couple of pebbles to vote, and you're compensated for your job. The thing about Athenian government is the people. That's where it's government for the people, by the people, is the people, I suppose. And I think one of the big problems, for example, my local MPs corrupt as hell. They all are, and local MLAs. Yeah. Check it if you look at Ian Paisley Jr. And he represents 72,000 people around here. And my question is how can any one individual represent the disparate interests or even the collective interests of 72,000 people? And we're a wee small country. But yeah, democracy is fascinating thing. But yeah, very, very little of it about, I think. Brad says this shows that everyone else was completely ignorant of the real reasons the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother came there. That sounds like it was under Jessica's behest. That's a good idea, Brad. Actually, we've often commented, or Brad says, or sorry, just to finish, or that's what other people think was the reason for her visit. Yeah, we've often mentioned, why does it take her 15 years to turn up and go, hey, do you remember that thing we talked about, your child from 15 years ago that's so important to all of our plans? There's a few wee things that don't quite add up, I think. And yes, I'd agree that I think pretty much everyone who's not Bene Gesserit, I think Paul's let into a wee bit of it, but is pretty much ignorant why the Reverend Mother is there. Now here we go. Who was it? Cynthia. Somebody was mentioning just, I think, previously about. Can't remember, so I'm just scrolling back up here, but it's about Cynthia. Women's fears, love, etc. Let's have a wee chat about that. Where how it tells me she frightened you with warnings about Arrakis. The Duke said, "Don't let a woman's fears cloud your mind." There you go. Solid advice from Duke Leto Atreides. No woman wants her loved ones endangered. Maybe, maybe not. That's not so bad an absolute, but yeah, it is an absolute, I suppose. The hand behind those warnings was your mother's. Take this as a sign for her love for us. And it's a bit sexist, isn't it? And we're going to find that this universe is that way, and deliberately so, I think. And it kind of helps rationalize things like the Bene Gesserit. The fact that the women would form a school for the education and of women, to look after women, to give women control of their own bodies. This kind of thing. It kind of does make sense in this universe, doesn't it? Don't let a woman's fears cloud your mind. No woman wants her loved ones. There's a bit more of this stuff, and of course we have Thufir's attitude to women, particularly the Bene Gesserit, and it's just a bit, and of course then we're going to, your mother's a woman too. So the other thing is the hand. There we go. We talk about the imagery of the hand being a symbol for agency, this kind of thing. The hand behind those warnings was your mother's. Take this as a sign of her love for us. And I just thought, yeah, it is a bit sexist, isn't it? But this is a sexist world, universe, and we get a little bit more of this, I suppose. just to read, does she know? Does she know about the Fremen? This is included in the bit that I don't think flows well. We have to make an assumption. My mum would have told me off badly for referring to her as she. I have to say, she didn't like it one bit. Does she know about the Fremen? Yes, and about much more. What? Question mark. And that I thought's a bit. Are you telling me my mother knows our man business? It's almost that kind of thing. Paul's surprise there's a bit. I don't know, a bit. It doesn't quite. After having witnessed, the Reverend Mother and his own mother, the fact that his mother is, does she know much about the Fremen? Yes, and about much more. What? Oh, sorry, I've misread that, haven't I? Yes, and about much more. What? Question mark. I actually thought that was something to do with did the Reverend Mother warn you? Does she know about the Fremen? Yes, and about much more. What? Question mark. Sorry, I misread that. That's okay. See, it helps to read some things twice. And the Duke thought, here we go, when we get this other internal monologue from the Duke, the truth could be worse than he imagines. But even dangerous facts are valuable if you've been trained to deal with them. And there's one place where nothing has been spared for my son, dealing with dangerous facts. This must be Levin, though. He is young. So there we go. No expense has been spared, in teaching my son how to deal with dangerous stuff. It's as simple as that. That's what he said. And I think it's quite funny, that of all the things that you could spare no expense on for your child, teaching them how to deal with dangerous facts, I suppose. It's kind of an interesting choice, isn't it? And of course, Paul is young. Dangerous facts are valuable. Dealing with dangerous facts. I don't know. It's an odd way of looking at information, isn't it? Facts are facts. The truth could be worse than he imagines. Yeah. We get a little bit of just a wee bit. I don't know. That's the Duke not really winning any parenting awards, I think, as far as I'm concerned. Let me see. Oh, sorry, hang on. I have to get the wheel on my mouse is appalling. There we go. Chaya says, I think the choppiness of the convo shows the coldness in Leto from Irulan's description at chapter start. Even Paul's relationship with Leto isn't as warm as with the other tutors. That's actually where I was at that point, Chaya. Just I think the she is Jessica, but I wasn't too sure. See, it's the use of the pronoun there. The hand behind those warnings was your mother. Take this as a sign of her love for us. That follows immediately on. So does she? That would suggest that it's Jessica, but I wasn't too sure myself. And yeah, Paul's relationship with Leto isn't. I agree, isn't as warm. It's not as friendly, but it's his father. Which I was just saying, Cynthia, I agree. Lord Kronk says, all groups seem to radiate their own form of sexism to their detriment. The noble lords have their bias. The Bene Gesserit see humans as out of their clique as a livestock. How many children fall to the Gom Jabbar? It's a very good point. Yeah, I think almost every group has its sexism. The Bene Chilax, look what they've done to their women. I suppose it's a good job. I suppose the mystery of the Bene Chilax, women, what's happened to them? Because I think if the Bene Gesserit found out, and so this becomes a plot point later on. We have a few mysteries in Dune. We're going to get a couple of them in this chapter that are mentioned. The things that we may or may never know. And there's all sorts of flaws within the different groupings within the Dune, the different societies in Dune. But yeah, it's a particularly sexist society, I think. Excuse me. So yeah, doesn't flow that well this little bit, and I think it is. You know, as we were just having a wee chat, it's just a wee. There's a wee bit. Even I'm misreading that there. I think is partly to do with that, and as Chaya was saying, it could, even is that the Reverend Mother? Does she know about the Fremen, or is it Jessica? Not too sure there, but I think it is Jessica, just because of the way it carries on. But it's a bit sloppy in terms of its writing. I think the fact that we have to try and figure something out, like who is he talking about? Here. Hmm. And of course, it's all right. Oh, it's all right. There's a wife just back in there, and that's all the girls are going to say hello. There we go. Sorry, right, let's see. That was our noodles. Just went by me under I was thinking like little sharks going around my feet. So we're about to find out quite a bit about House Atreides' financial situation, Chom, and a few of the. I suppose it's quite interesting. So few products escape the Chom touch. The Duke said, "Logs. This is a bizarre list, isn't it? Logs, donkeys, horses, cows, lumber, dung, sharks, whale fur, the most prosaic and the most exotic. Even our poor pondy rice from Caladan. Anything the guild will transport, the art forms of Ikaz, the machines of Riches and Ix, but all fades before melange. A handful of spice will buy a home on Tupile. It cannot be manufactured. It must be mined on Arrakis. It is unique and it has true geriatric properties." And of course, we're going to get a little bit about melange here and a fair chunk about the guild. Sorry, Chom and the guild. Excuse me. So, just in terms of what we learn, we know that House Atreides isn't particularly rich. And we kind of, and of course, Thufir tells Paul previously, "You should know that. We're not that well off for one of the great houses." And I think the suggestion is that they certainly don't have access to Chom directorship in this at this point. Excuse me. But we start to get a sense of few products escape their grip. Basically, Chom sells anything that the guild will transport. We get a fair wee list of all sort of, quite a bizarre little list. But we get a few different mentions of a couple of the planets there. We get the art forms of Ikaz, which is of course the wood that can be shaped by thought, etc., and the machines of Ix and Riches. And of course, we're told all fades before melange, and a handful of spice will buy a house on Tupile. So we're told a few things about melange. It cannot be manufactured, must be mined on Arrakis. It's unique. There's no other thing like it, and it has true geriatric properties. The other wee thing there, just briefly about Tupile, I haven't got to the etymology of some of these words today. Been a bit busy, folks, so I'll have to do a wee bit of backtracking. Is it if we find it in the back of the book under the terminology of the Imperium, and it's the so-called sanctuary planet. And there's a wee note that it's possibly several different worlds. It is home to the defeated houses of the Imperium. It's known only to the guild, precise location, and it's kept. This secret is kept inviolate as part of the guild peace. So it's just a little interesting thing. If House Atreides did go on the run, did go rogue, and this was an option. They could have told the Emperor, "Stuff you, we're not doing it. If he's going to attack, pack up your household and your ships and clear off to this place," and they would have lived kind of, not as a great house, but they would have lived quite possibly happily ever after. So there's a little bit on Tupile there. And of course, and now we control it, says Paul, to a certain degree. And I think that's the interesting bit there. No. Let's just see. Chias and Duke calls Reverend Miller. She frightened you. Mm. Aye, how it tells me she frightened you with warnings about Arrakis. That yeah, it's Thufir reporting back, I suppose, but that's what Thufir tells him. And I think, oh yeah, there was fear there. I think, but it's interesting. Uh, Noodle the giant Sam trout with you. Evil Noodles. Oh, she's great. Knowing the value of a home on Tupaz suggests that Leto has thought about taking his family and going rogue. Baron Piter considered, then dismissed this possibility. Very good point, Cynthia. He kind of knows how much. Yeah, why would you know? Why would you know how much a house costs on Tupaz, some other planet? Um, yes, a handful of melange. Consider just maybe a handful is an incredible, worth an incredible amount. Um, hmm. Yeah, the economics of melange. And of course, this is what we're getting to find out a wee bit about. Um, Brad says the mention of the geriatric properties brings a question to mind. What proportion of the great houses use spice, and does that affect how long a generation is if their life is extended? Well, generation, I would, whenever I refer to a generation within my work, I call it 20 years, which is the point roughly. And I think generationally thinking is a good way to think of it as 20 years. From the point of, say, giving birth to a child to the point where that child is grown and can give birth to another generation. So I'd argue you could have 5 generations, probably more actually, of one family within a century. Um, I suppose what's interesting is maybe you don't take melange. Maybe you just grow old, and then you go, shit, I'm about to die. Maybe I'm gonna live a normal lifespan. If I take this, I'll live longer. What have I got to lose? Um, that kind of thinking. And again, it's not really brilliantly fleshed out. We do know that if a universe on addicted to melange that is withdrawn, it's one of the ways that I think the God Emperor takes out an awful lot of people. But again, it's always just a casual mention. It's a background thing. You think by the year 10,000 that they'd have made a few medical advances in the science of aging, with or without spice. 10,000. Aye. Well, 10,191, I think, is about. I think I've done the work. I think it's about the year 34,000, isn't it? According, that's the Bene Gesserit calendar. Yes, you'd reckon that, but I think there's also probably setbacks and so on and so forth, possibly. And we don't know what the Butlerian Jihad did. And in terms of the medical advances, it's possible that they could have all been done by thinking machines or people with thinking machines, if you see what I mean. Take away the internet today and see what happens. If you could just kill the internet for 5 days or a week, well, people would go nuts. They wouldn't know what to do. We were even talking about not too long ago, with COVID and everything hitting all sorts of problems, how many of us are capable of actually feeding ourselves? And I mean, if there's no supermarket, something like this, can you go out and actually forage for food? Can you keep yourself alive? And the level of dependency that we have on our governments, and particularly for food and things like this. And of course, your money's no good to you if there's no food, is it? You can't eat your money. So, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it brings up quite a lot of questions actually. But I think it's a good point. Yeah, I don't see the point of why take it when you're young, if you know what I mean. If you're gonna, might as well. You could take it when you get older, if it has geriatric properties and that allows you to live a bit longer. But we don't know the limits of that, do we? Either, I suppose. And I think, is it possibly we were talking about Yuri the other day? However, whatever age he is, presents as an old man, doesn't he? Excuse me. Just based on, let me see there. Just what somebody was saying there. What proportion of the great houses use spice, and does that affect how long a generation is if their life is extended. Proportion. We get a little bit about this, I think. I'd imagine that most of the houses are buying melange. Uh, Let me see. And we're about to get this little thought experiment, really, aren't we? Pardon me. Paul says, but now we control it to a certain degree, but the important thing is to consider all the houses that depend on Chom profits and think of the enormous proportion of those profits dependent upon a single product, the spice. Imagine what would happen if something should reduce spice production. Whoever had stockpiled melange would make a killing, Paul said. Others would be out in the cold. And the Duke permitted himself a moment of grim satisfaction, looking at his son and thinking how penetrating, how truly educated that observation had been. He nodded. The Harkonnens have been stockpiling for more than 20 years. So we get a wee thing that'll follow on from this about the different houses. And that if Leto messes this up, that he basically will tell us that the Great Convention be damned, they'll probably just do whatever they want to, and their profits come first. So in terms of the houses having melange, I dare say everybody wants to get a little bit. And I think the one interesting thing we don't hear about melange is how quickly it decays, if you see what I mean. You don't hear about the blue within blue eyes of addiction in the great houses. Even the emperor, who we know uses it to extend life, so maybe small doses enough. Yeah, I think the whole eyes of Avad, etc., is through pure saturation. You'd have to be just sucking it in all the time. But yeah, if it's just a pill a day, there you go. If you expect to live to be 200, you might wait longer to marry and have kids. Yeah. It's a very good point. That's a very sort of culture thing, isn't it? That's what the culture a bit like. Live a couple of 100 years as a male, live a couple, swap genders, have a baby, gendered back. They can do anything, become a plant. Dear. So this is Brad. In later books, we encounter characters who wear contact lenses to hide their spice addiction. Excellent. Very good point. Really, the full, in terms of even, I suppose the people that really have the blue within blue all the way, is it's going to be the guild, the navigators and the Fremen, pretty much, or anybody who's been on Arrakis long enough. Pretty much, that's the way it works. But still, taking any drug that's 100%, that will kill you if you withdraw from it, I think is an interesting one. You'd have to have a good discussion with yourself. It's not something that maybe you would consider taking young. I don't know. But there we go. Whereas if you're quite elderly, what have you got to lose if you can extend your life by 50 years? The risk of not having any Arrakis for a day or any spice for a day or two. Maybe you'll just take that risk. Yeah. So it just got me thinking about Gilgamesh and the quest for immortality and that kind of thing. Longevity. Let's see. So yeah, the economics of the empire is being kind of laid out for us here. There's dependency. The great houses depend on Chom. They depend on Chom profits. And if what we're being told is that the bulk of the Chom profits would come from spice production. That's where it really is. And of course, if we get this conversation about what if somebody could muck with the supply, and we have stockpiling melange, we make a killing, others would be out in the cold, and it gives. I think the interesting bit there is just a wee point about Leto, that the Duke permitted himself a moment of grim satisfaction, looking at his son and thinking how penetrating, how truly educated this observation has been. And of course, we get the next bit of information from that, Harkonnens have been stockpiling melange for 20 plus years. The only thing I've written, how penetrating, how educated that observation has been, I've just written under that and highlighted it. Chom is OPEC. And no allegory there at all. Chom is OPEC as far as Frank Herbert's concerned. And in that case, we can run the analog for melange as oil. And we can see an analog to that in the real world, therefore, because countries stockpile oil and all sorts of things. And we get a wee bit of insight into. I think this is interesting. This is the Atreides kind of view of what the Harkonnens are up to, and we've kind of got the kind of counterpoint of it from the Baron and Piter earlier on. But we now do know that they've been stockpiling melange. Melange equates to wealth, and that the wealth is going to be used for guild privileges, etc., etc. Oh, thank you very much, love. That's a fresh coffee. Different guitar mug. Thanking you. Oh, that's nice. Some grim satisfaction. Yeah, man. I don't know if there's a pride in Leto trying to sort of make Paul into, I don't know what he's trying to make his son into. But, a dangerous Duke Mentat, I suppose. But it's not really I don't know. So we get the Atreides' view of the Harkonnen plan. And I think it's quite funny. Spicewood production is probably going to fail. And simply put, they want to blame the Atreides for it. And I think the way it's put is, let's just read it. They wish the Atreides name to become unpopular, the Duke said. Think of the Landsraad houses that look to me for a certain amount of leadership. They're unofficial spokesmen. Think of how they'd react if I were responsible for a serious reduction in their income. After all, one's own profits come first. The great convention be damned. You can't let someone pauperize you. A harsh smile twisted the Duke's mouth. They'd look the other way no matter what was done to me. And we'll get a wee bit about the atomics here. But I think this is really interesting that Leto thinks that that's the extent of the Baron's plan, is to make him unpopular. And then basically the other houses would all turn on him. And which I suppose it would leave the Baron kind of relatively free of any kind of criticism, and he wouldn't need troops. And what Leto's suggesting there actually kind of makes the whole thing about taking out House Atreides kind of silly and redundant, but it's about vengeance, I suppose. But the really interesting bit here is that Leto sees himself as their unofficial spokesman. Poor dummies in the Landsraad, they could do with somebody like him to speak for. And I just thought that's quite interesting. And I just thought it reminded me of the comment that Paul made to the Reverend Mother. You take a lot upon yourselves, don't you? Well, Leto, you're the unofficial spokesman for all of these houses on all these different planets. And it's okay. I'm sure. So he speaks for other people, not necessarily with their permission. Excuse me. Give us a wee second, folks. I'm just going to blow my nose. It'll be so loud. I'll just mute the microphone a wee quick second. There we go. Sorry about that. I was half tempted to blow some air out of my eyes, but that can tickle the inside of my brain, which would start me sneezing, so I'll not bother. Let me catch up with your comments a wee bit, folks. We're moving way up there. Let's see. Yes, we're going back to characters who wear contact lenses to hide spice addiction. Piter has the eyes, says a lot about his level of consumption. Yes, Piter's drug habit's quite pricey. That's what I was thinking, that the one planetary ruler would rule for normal people's generations. This would make the noble houses look godlike to them. It's a good point. Well, if it's maybe only the rich can afford it, then longevity is not a thing that belongs to the poor. Lord Crunk says, Emperor Shaddam, 72 years old, yet looking no older than 35, and without blue eyes. Powerful stuff, that spice. That's it. We just having a wee chat about that the other day. Lord Crunk, he's about 70 something, but he looked about 20 or 30, 35 as you're saying. Yeah, it's not full on saturation. And I think enough people take melange in different ways. I think, as I said, it'd be really interesting to try and put them all together. I think as we go through this, if we can get something like what I did with the sandworm, to get the life cycle of the sandworms, you need all 6 Dune books to get all of the pieces of information. I have that little, very basic little flow chart, and it was simply made by going looking for that stuff. Just it was one of the reads I did of Dune where I'm just after the life cycle. As much as I've read it as an ecological, from the ecological theme, if you like, I have read Dune once, all of it, to find the life cycle of the worms, and that was it, nothing else. And it just resulted in, because I had to take so many words out of my PhD, it ended up one of those where a picture paints 1,000 words, if you like. And in this case, it painted a lot more than that, but just sort of made it into a wee diagram in the end. Maybe Stilgar's 300 years old but doesn't like to brag. Yeah, you could have the Fremen being incredibly long lived, and if that's the case, then you're starting to add a level of experience, particularly in terms of fighting and stuff like this, to these individuals. Somebody who's been around for 300 years would know a lot, I think. It doesn't like to brag. Leto's father is called the Old Juke. I thought that was referring to his age, yet Leto became Duke fairly young, I think. Chaya, I think, is that the bit in... Hang on, Leto's father. Yeah, that's right. The Old Juke. Sorry, just misread that a wee bit there. Just getting in my head. Leto's father's called it. Thought this was referring to his age, yet Leto became Duke fairly young, I think. Yeah. At the same time, it's a kind of common thing for, nobility to have children quite late, if you know what I mean. If noble houses control Chom with the guild, yet between them they gobble most of the spice. It's like the Dr. Seuss book about economy based on mowing each other's lawns. It's very good. Noble houses control Chom. Some of them do, and remember that it's the guild and the Bene Gesserit are silent partners there. As much as we know about control, that the Emperor has, we get his actual control, how much stock he has, if you like. So he's got the just over, I think, 50%. But we are told that the guild and the Bene Gesserit are silent partners, which is an interesting way of phrasing it, I suppose. Leto can't be that naive. He invoked Manly in his missive to the Baron. He ought to know the Baron wants him, or Canley. Yes, he did invoke Canley in his missive to the Baron. He ought to know the Baron wants him dead. Yeah, just got to the Canley bit there, Chai. Thank you. Maybe the Baron was invoking Manly. So the interesting that Leto doesn't mention the vendetta, Canley, etc., and his negotiations with the Baron. This talk of Landsrad sounds like a white paper explanation, not dangerous facts. But anyone who knows a drug dealer can tell you the first rule is never use your own merchandise. The bard isn't braggadocious. Well, yeah, the interesting. Well, I think Paul knows about the Canley thing, because they're mortal. Is it their mortal enemies, the Harkonnen? I'm wondering, is that in Paul's head there, or is that part of? No, he knows that. Paul knows that the Harkonnens. Yeah, all the way back to the start of the book, Thufir Hawat, his father's master of assassins, had explained it. Their mortal enemies, the Harkonnens, had been on Arrakis 80 years, holding the planet in Quasi-Fife under a Chom Company contract to mine the geriatric spice melange. Now they're leaving. So interesting, they've been there for 80 years, but they're only stockpiling melange for 20, I suppose. And just the other wee characteristics of Leto there, I think the smiles, the grim smiles, and This kind of thing. There's something of we'll see it right at the very end. Actually, I think of this chapter when we get the kind of skull that Paul sees on his face. Um, mm. Colleges and cannibals have missed several live episodes here. Might have to binge watch. No worries, Colin. Thanks for joining us. We're getting there. We're only at what are we chapter? This is chapter 6, so we're 6 in, if you like, one per chapter. Seems to be going quite well, I think, so far. And as I said, it's great when we get interactions like this because everybody spots little things and knows little bits and pieces, and we all know something different. And certainly, there's always different ways of looking at things. Let's see. So yeah, I think they're going to make me unpopular, and then it actually sounds like a better plan, doesn't it? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Set. It's kind of what I would do if I wanted to get rid of Leto. I'd create a situation where the Landsrod tears him apart. Why go and fight people yourself? I'll tell you a wee story about something like that one day. It's something I did to the local government here. But yeah. The great, and of course, he's sort of saying there, that as much as when he was talking about being their unofficial spokesman, he seems to have a good sense of how the how the economy works, and ultimately the greed of the great houses and how they would react if someone took away their profits. Great convention be damned! You can't let someone pauperize you. We have to assume that that's Leto's feelings as well. A harsh smile twisted the Duke's mouth. They looked the other way no matter what was done to me. And we're about to get an interesting wee question from Paul here. But just pointing out that every time we're getting lots of references to Leto's mouth, this twisted smile, grim smile, this kind of thing. And the word grim. And it was just the point that, he's forced himself to the casual gesture, sat down on a corner of the table, smiled. And I keep wondering, is the smile always forced? Sorry. And of course, Paul says surely they would, even if we were attacked with atomics. And this is nothing that flagrant, no open defiance of the Great Convention. So this is we had a wee chat about that the other week. The Great Convention, as Leto says, be damned, but it prevents the use of atomic weapons against people, doesn't it? I think. Interestingly, he says no, there wouldn't be nothing that flagrant, no open defiance, but they would do almost anything else, perhaps even dusting and a bit of soil poisoning. And I was wondering what dusting means, and a bit of soil poisoning. I just kind of put Carthage there. Whether I don't know if anybody knows the story, but it's probably apocryphal. The Romans salting the ground outside of Carthage so that nothing would grow. This is after the Third Punic Wars, I think. So let's check out. The Romans have a right old Barney with the Carthaginians for quite a bit, actually, in terms of kind of controlling interests in the Mediterranean. And the famous general of Carthage, of course, is Hannibal. So we get, there'll be no blatant, but they might poison our soil, they might dust our plant. I'm assuming dusting. I don't know. Has anybody got any ideas about that one? Excuse me. Does it explain how the Harkonnen avoid getting the eyes if they lived on Dune for 80 years? Are the cities hermetically sealed or in areas of low spice levels? Brad, there is a mention of the Baron doesn't go there. It's I have a planetary governor. They run the planet. Pretty much the plan, I think, is it to make Rabban will get into that plan, but I think it's certainly done through people on his staff, if you like. It's one of the things that I actually thought, why don't the Atreides do that? Why don't they install key individuals, delegate, Uh, there's lots of things that aren't explained about the Harkonnen being on Arrakis for 80 years, particularly in the case of the Fremen. The cities aren't hermetically sealed or anything like that. I have to say that I thought the city in the new Dune film was appalling. And I just didn't get it at all. It just looked like a big blob, big metal blob. Just I don't know, like somebody built something out of Lego. And it had just no detail at all. It didn't look like a city. It just looked like a big box. Very strange. So a little bit about the Great Convention there, etc., etc. But basically, if our profits and melange are gone, we're going to take it out on whoever's to blame. And of course, it's all really to do with the nature of monopoly and space travel being so important and all. And we get another one of Paul's questions that's going to invoke a certain response, if you like, and provide us with a bit of information. And simply put, why are we walking into this? What on earth are you thinking is what Paul, with an exclamation mark. The Duke frowned at his son, not happy about this. Knowing where the trap is, that's the first step in evading it. And this is quite interesting. I'll give you my wee note on it. This is like single combat, son, only on a larger scale. A feint within a feint within a feint. There's that plans within plans within plans. The blue within blue within blue. Feint within feint within feint. These little motifs of repetitive triplets, if you like. A feint within a feint within a feint, seemingly without end. And the task is to unravel it. Knowing that the Harkonnens stockpile melange, we ask another question. Who else is stockpiling? And that's the list of our enemies. And of course, we're told that certain... Now, I'll just kind of put down that very briefly. Tell me what you think of this, guys. This is like single combat, only on a larger scale. What does that mean? War, so it's like single combat, except there's more than one person, more than a couple of people involved, this kind of thing. And just in terms of all of those kind of Homeric references that we'll find within Dune, single combat within the Iliad is often referred to as what's called Aristeia. To do with the word arete, it's to do with excellence. Aristeia is when any one individual hero pairs up against the opposing hero and they kick off, usually to the resulting death of one of these people. But it's the point is they'll be demonstrating their excellence in battle, if you like, and it's a way of testing yourself. So Aristeia is kind of a one-on-one combat within well, certainly for a while within Greece, but within the Homeric epics, you'll see it there. It exists in kind of right throughout Greek culture and all kinds of things. It's one of the reasons, for example, why we know so much about X, Y, and Z, if you like. Particularly, they like their competitions. And if for example, the idea of arete, Aristeia, this kind of, how do you know if you're a good baker? By competing against other bakers, this kind of thing, and by trying to do your best. So agon would be the struggle, the work that you do, if you like. But it's just a wee point. Just I thought it was a very odd turn of phrase. It's like single combat, son, only on a larger scale. And I've actually put that. Either what is that? I just thought it was quite a stupid comment to make. It sounds stupid, doesn't it? So task is to unravel who else is stockpiling, and we get a list of the enemies, I suppose. Certain houses we knew were unfriendly, not really told much about them, and some we thought were friendly. So, of the two possibilities, friendly, I suppose three: friendly, unfriendly, and neutral. Maybe a lot of people seem to be doing a bit of it. I suppose that's what we get out of that. And of course, knowing where the trap is the first step in avoiding it. Leto doesn't avoid the trap at all. He walks right into it. Brad, that's a very good point. Believe it or not, crop dusting. That's what exactly. How do we put it there? Crop. Sorry, just find this. What would they do? Dusting and soil poisoning. And what you're saying, Brad, crop dusting. I was thinking, I would agree with that. There's a relationship between this book and Silent Spring, if you like, that kind of thing about that's going on at the time. And it's a big environmental issue at the time. And this is Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. So yeah, crop dusting, DDT, all of this stuff. Very good. Thank you for pointing that out, Brad. That's it. That's what I was wondering about, that crop dusting. Cynthia says, we've seen Paul being trained in single combat, so maybe Leto was trying to link his narrative to Paul's everyday experience. Also agree with your Homeric link. Yeah. It's just it's like single combat, only bigger, more, lots of men. That's not, it's just, but I think, as I said, there's a couple of wee bits in this chapter that I don't think flow. The writing's not tip top, and from it's something that Herbert's writing is usually pretty. It's quite complex. There's a lot of things going on, and it usually is excellent. But there's a couple of wee things here I think that just don't quite make sense. Single, yeah. The Homeric link is I don't know if any of you guys have ever read the Iliad or listened to it. Whenever to the two heroes, and you've got the Greek heroes, of course, or the Achaeans, the Argives, whatever you want to call them, and then you have the Trojans, and they kind of have it's a bit like there's good guys and bad guys on both sides, I suppose. There's notable archers of the Greeks, a notable archer with the Trojans, this kind of thing. But whenever people do go at each other, the Aristide is pretty interesting, incredibly violent, and the some of the descriptions of the deaths of as Achilles shoved his spear up into his groin, they're quite horrific. They're very detailed, and not only that, they extend past the death of the individual and have their soul involved in this, as well as it goes to Hades. This kind of pretty spooky stuff. The Iliad, when it comes to it, are very, very violent, but its descriptions of death in Aristide are pretty full on. I remember reading the Iliad the first time and going, okay, this is really violent, and we get it. It's a war, but it's in the descriptions. It's the detail. It's I've read a couple of other probably maybe genuine war books, but you don't get this level of description of that kind of thing, if you see what I mean. And I'm never quite too sure what the effect is, because I think it would certainly, if I was an ancient Greek listening to it, it would give me pause to think. I think really make me think about life and the afterlife, I suppose. So the stockpiling of spice, Brad says, shows how long this plan has been in development, only now to come to a head. The other houses are blind if they don't see the Baron, the Emperor, behind it. They come to save the day. So this is in the Iliad. It's important to have worthy opponents with worthy weapons. Absolutely. It's quite an important thing in lots of epics and sagas, actually. On 2 points there, worthy opponents, worthy weapons. And in Beowulf. Beowulf's oh no, don't ask me to remember this guy's name, but he's given a sword, and out of here, take this. This is and it's whoever gives it to him is not a decent. He's a bit of a twat, as far as I can. I'm trying to remember the names, but it's been I'll have to get me Beowulf out. I've got a couple of different copies of it, but yeah, the sword, the sword, the unworthy sword breaking on the hero is a common thing, and broken swords are a big thing in mythology. And more often than not, what you'll find is that whichever hero tends to be, whatever weapon they tend to bear, it's a very common thing that the weapon breaks, and ultimately, regardless of I'm a great, all of these guys get in there and kind of throttle or punch or they're in to grapple to death, and this includes people like Theseus. Um, Let me see. I'm trying to think. Does it happen again? Um, Beowulf as well. Theseus, Heracles. There's a whole bunch of heroes where this kind of motif works there, and I think culturally, a broken sword has different meanings. And of course, you'll get the broken. Of course, the Narsil, isn't it? The shards of Narsil from Lord of the Rings is a broken sword. And it's just one of those little things that I suppose I'll call them motifs or myth themes or something like that. But they appear. It appears a lot in mythology. I think it's very interesting. Again, the sword, the weapon, obviously, is a symbol of agency. But for it to break, and in particular for the hero at that point to have nothing but wits and hands, depending on who they are, as opposed and just get in there and slug it out. It actually brings the hero onto an equal footing with whatever monster or opponent that he's dealing with, and therefore makes here's a magical sword that'll just cut through anything, and that'll go kill the not very scary monster if you've got a weapon that can just do that to it. It's the feeling of the weapon that makes I would argue makes the hero's actions much more impressive. It's often it depends. Sometimes the hero's not worthy of the weapon, but usually it's the other way around, I think. Were the opponents worthy weapons? Leto was like, "Ooh, what a lovely little twat." Very. I think I'll step right in. It's so cozy. Just imagine Eric. Oh, was you going Eric Idle? I was kind of going. I was kind of Elmer Fudd and or Tweety Eric Idle saying that in falsetto. Leto was like, "Oh, what a lovely little twat! I'll step right in. It's so cozy." Yeah, it is. If the first step in avoiding a trap is knowing its existence. The second step is not going into it. Surely, Dusting referred to large-scale use of radioactive salts, keeping with the old practice, given that atomic munitions cannot be used. Very good. That's a good one, and or perhaps something small-scale like the plutonium assassinations we have seen. Yeah, and it's kind of works with that Carthaginian idea, doesn't it? And it is kind of one of those things that we talk about. I don't think it's true, by the way. I don't think the Romans would have sat and wasted all that salt. But yeah, that's the it's quite interesting. Carthage would be modern day. Is it Tunis? I think around there. Pardon me, in Tunisia. Got some nice photos actually from there. Oh no, is it Morocco maybe? But they're not mine. My dad took them and got some Roman stuff from there. Quite interesting. So yeah, it's some form of airborne. Yeah, the suggestion is it's some kind of in terms of what Arrakis has to, or sorry, not what Arrakis has to offer. In terms of what Caladan's major commodity seems to be, is rice. And if that's what the Atreides wealth is based on, then it would make sense to sort of hit their crops, wouldn't it? But yeah, that's breaking swords. Who can forget Borman's Excalibur? Never got round to the source material. Well, there's an awful lot of source material. Borman's Excalibur's based on Mallory's, I think, La Morte d'Arthur. But yes. It's very good in that. It's because he does something unworthy of it. Of course, there's more. There's a couple of different swords. Arthur has two swords, by the way. The other one's called Clarent, because you can't knight anybody with Excalibur because it cuts through anything. So if you arise, it cuts through stone. That's Excalibur's thing, It has a few other weapons that are very similar to it, or probably the same weapon. Yes, colleges and camels. I absolutely adore what's called anything to do with King Arthur is called the Matter of Britain, and I love it. I have a bunch of stuff here. I'll maybe bring them out sometime. I certainly would like to have a good chat about mythology and epics and sagas and their relationship within science fiction. But I have all sorts of stuff there, like the Green Knight, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Sorry, we've got what else? I've got some Chrétien de Troyes, Arthurian romances, and I used to have a bunch of these that were all wrecked and ruined in my old the house that I was renting. But yeah, the Vulgate, isn't it? Is it King Arthur, Lancelot, and the Mort d'Arthur? I think Death of Arthur. But there's lots of different versions, and the Matter of Britain really writings begin, I'd say, around 6th century onwards, 6th century AD. So, and it's still going on today and would include things like Shakespeare. So there you go. Yeah, I love John Borman's Excalibur is my favorite film. I always wanted. I don't really like saying that one thing, but it is my favorite film, and I just love watching it. And I think it's a very, very intelligent, wonderful film. Old-fashioned filmmaking, Didn't Janus begin his duel with Paul by saying, "May your knife chip and shatter"? Yeah. Of course, the Fremens, the Fremens, what do you call it? The crysknives are kind of fixed, aren't they, to the individual? Whatever they do to them, whenever the individual dies, I think the knife kind of fizzes away or something, doesn't it? Something like that. Again, we'll get all to it's one of those things where you read it through X amount of times, I suppose, and now we're hitting the detail. We'll learn all this as we go, folks. Started that new Gawain flick this week, hard going. Colleges and camels, those would be enjoyable discussions. The Sir Gawain and the Green Knight film I thought was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's a big help if you know the story, I suppose, put it that way. Bear with me 1 second. There we go. Where are you going? Oh, for the love of God. There you are. Sorry, folks. There's an awful lot of King Arthur, Arthurian myth within the whole Camelot thing within Dune as well. That's Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And this is a translation by Bernard O'Donoghue. And these are Penguin classics that came out a wee while back. And it's real thin. There you go. And you're sort of middle. This is a good translation. You can get these with Middle English, I suppose. Old English. Now it's anonymous. And of course, if you want to know how Sir Gawain and the Green Knight begins, the first line is, "When the war and the siege of Troy were all over." Here you go. You get all the stuff's connected. Yeah, so it's not a long read, but it's quite a nicely printed book. There's about 78 pages, but they're not full up. But if you read it, you'd get the film. No problem. And the film ends before the ending. So you actually won't get the ending of it. But I will say this, that it's a great, great poem. And I absolutely adore Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It's a Christmas story. Very much so. I've got a couple of wee things here I'll just show you quickly, but we'll get back to June. This isn't really the place for this, but that's a few of these came out recently. Sagas of the Volsungs and the Elder Edda. I got some Penguins classics have brought out some lovely editions of a lot of this stuff. I think they have the Wanderer as well, which I didn't get because I already got a copy of that. That's a rather good Arthurian. That's Chrétien de Troyes. Arthurian romances. There's all sorts of things in there, but there's a lot of Dune within that. But the poem Gawain and the Green Knight's not particularly long, but it's a great film. If you know the poem, it makes perfect sense, and I thought it was a very beautiful film, I have to say. A house I was running. And surely House Sloan should be mentioned. Oh, Sloans are our association is hmm, quite an old family, but arguably one of the oldest in Ireland. But that's part of a bullshit myth. But just as old as every other one, I suppose. But yeah, traditionally we're the soldiers of the Irish, if you like. But there's a whole set of myths associated with us, but they're not true. They're made up by well, I'll probably do a wee chat about that some night. I think we mentioned it briefly, but it was particularly to do with the hands and stuff. We were talking about how some historians here have tried to create a new myth um, about particularly Protestant Irishness, if you like, that it's one of those strange things. But let's get back to Dune, folks. So, what have we got there? Donnelly said, "An Aristaia's excellence. The Aristaia is a trilogy of tragedies written by Aeschylus that ends with the end of the curse on the House of Atreides." Yes, Aristaia is excellence, and it has a couple of, there's a rite, is where a couple of different approaches to it, but within the context of Homer's Iliad, it is one-on-one combat, where both soldiers are going to show their excellence at how good a fighter they are, if you see what I mean. So Aeschylus, I suppose Aeschylus ends, but the curse isn't ended there. At the end of the Aristaia, I know there's more killing to be done. So I've done a wee video on this, Donald, and it's just that there's some wee stuff on the history of the Pelopid line. But actually, there's more people to be killed by, and then the house actually comes to an end because it's wiped out, I think. Really puts me in. Colin Campbell really pulls me in, but the anachronistic ethnicities keeps booting me out. It's yeah. I wouldn't worry about it. Just go with it. It is a good film. It's a very good film. I thought Dev Patel was really good in it, and yeah, again, it's one of those things, I suppose, about nobody would be speaking English probably back then, so a bit of suspension of disbelief. But it's they're not going to do it in kind of old English, I suppose. And no, I genuinely enjoyed it. I think it's a really good film. Though I think my wife didn't understand the ending, and I told them what she saw in the film out, and then I said, "Well, you haven't seen the ending. You don't get to see what happens." So I explained the ending to her, and she went, "Oh, why didn't they just show that?" And I said, "Well, for most people, I'd argue that Sir Gawain and the Green Knight's not on anybody really in the modern world's reading list. Well, not too many people." Oh dear. Sean Harris plays a great part in the Green Knight. I'm very bad with actors' names, I have to say. Excellent. Yeah, really puts me in the, anachronistic ethnicities keeps booting me. All of that stuff. The world's full of people moving around. Even way back then. Now, let's see. Where did we get to? So the trap. Sorry, just Ball's question. Why are we walking into this? We got a wee bit of the whole knowing where the trap is, and that's why we got a wee bit distracted. I'd written Aristaia there, so nice to take a wee wander off. But let's get back on on track. We had that feint within a feint within a feint we were talking about. Let's see. Certain houses unfriendly, all houses disguised. I must have backtracked a wee bit. No, here we go. And of course, friendly houses, unfriendly houses, and of course, the way Leto puts it, our beloved Padishah Emperor. He's stockpiling too, and he's the biggest shareholder. So, Paul, again, another question from Paul that's going to give us a dump of information. And couldn't you convene the Landsraad, expose, and no, he's cut off. And Leto explains this: make our enemy aware that we know which hand holds the knife. Now, Paul, we see the knife now. Who knows where it may be shifted? It might be shifted next. If we put this before the Landsraad, it only create a great cloud of confusion. The Emperor would deny it. Who could gainsay him? All we'd gain is a little time while risking chaos. And where would the next attack come from? Paul says all the houses might start stockpiling spice. And he says that the enemies have had a head start, too much of a lead for it to make a difference. Now, let me see. So, you get the convene the lands, right? You get the suggestion that this is the kind of the legal weight that they can bring to bear. But Leto's refusal of this is no, it would tip our hand. Basically, it would let the emperor know that we know, what he's up to, and that he may become secretive. He'd also deny it, and it would create confusion. And I think very interesting point. We would gain time. Pardon me. Let's just read it. All we'd gain is a little time while risking chaos. Excuse me. So I just thought just put risked chaos here. Dune is one of those things that's fundamentally about presenting order to chaos. And for those who discuss Asimov's Foundation series, that there's a set of arguments that the Dune series is Dune is a response to Foundation, and then that the later Foundation books, the next, not the first three, but those after, are a response to Dune. Foundation's meant to represent a chaos to law approach within this imperial kind of society, and Dune's the opposite. So it's just that we note that we don't want to risk chaos, and chaos isn't that bad, I think. But personally, I'm a big fan of it. Very good at causing it if I wish to. Yeah, I suppose it's we don't want to tip our hand is essentially what he's saying here. Though it still has as we talked about a wee bit earlier, hint of stupidity, a hint of naivety. College of Council really puts me at the end. Oh yeah, plays the king. To win a girl, one must quote with ease from Aeschylus and Euripides. Very good. That's a good quote. I must remember that. To win a girl, one must. Oh, sorry, my mouse is annoying. It's the wheel. To win a girl, one must quote with ease from Aeschylus and Euripides. I like that. No bother. Oh dear. I actually got my wife to marry me by writing a song for her. So there you go. I don't think quoting Aeschylus would have done it. But I wrote her a song. So it's about, we're up at this point where, if he hides this attack, then if we force him to kind of sneak back into the shadows, and he's not really out in the open too much, what would happen? And they get a sense of this. It's all the houses might start stockpiling spice. Our enemies have had a head start. Too much of a lead to overcome. And then Paul's observation, the Emperor. And that means the Sardaukar. Disguised in Harkonnen livery, no doubt, the Duke said. But the soldier fanatics nonetheless. And I thought that's actually exactly what are these two, as Paul maybe, Paul's just pretty much hit the thing on the head. The Emperor means his Sardaukar. But for Leto to kind of go, yeah, and they're probably going to turn up dressed as the Harkonnen too, he's absolutely bang on. I just thought it was okay that the conversation. I suppose it's meant to maybe show that he is politically astute. We'd assume they have spies and things like this as well. But we're going to get a little bit about one of the big mysteries of Dune, and we're going to have a chat about the Sardaukar here. And again, it's Paul's questions drawing this information out. How can the Fremen help us against Sardaukar? Well, here we go. Let's have a wee read at this bit. Okay. How can Fremen help us against Sardaukar? Did Howat tell you about Seleucus Secundus? The Emperor's prison planet? No. What if it were more than a prison planet, Paul? There's a question you never hear asked about the Imperial core of Sardaukar. Where did they come from? From the prison planet. They come from somewhere. But the supporting levies the Emperor demands from, that's what we're led to believe. They're just the Emperor's levies, trained young and superbly. You hear an occasional muttering about the Emperor's training cadres, but the balance of our civilization remains the same. The military forces of the Landsraad's great houses on one side, the Sardaukar and their supporting levies on the other. And their supporting levies, Paul. The Sardaukar remain the Sardaukar. And we have this of every report of Salusa Secundus says SS is a hell world. So, and I think it's interesting. Salusa Secundus there is abbreviated to SS. And I think it's quite an obvious association. I think Salusa Secundus, the Sardaukar, the SS, I suppose later on we get stormtroopers and things like that, won't we? That's I think it's a deliberate reference to the shoot staff, the SS themselves. They're fanatical, the Emperors. So how could the Fremen possibly help us against these guys? And we have a connection between Salusa Secundus and the Sardaukar. And of course, what if it's more than that? Where did the Sardaukar come from? From the prison planet. Some of them, I think, yes. But the interesting point is that the Emperor's levies support the Sardaukar. And that the Sardaukar are the Sardaukar. So this is one of our big mysteries in Dune. Where did the Sardaukar come from? It's kind of solved for us eventually, but we get a fair bit of info about them here, and it's a very, very interesting little piece. What we're going to get here is actually Frank Herbert's view of the army, of the military. And there's more to that that'll come much, much later, actually. Let's see, where am I? What does he say here? So, 41, let's see. Paul nodded, holding his attention on his father's face. Here we go. Sorry, I jumped a wee bit there. So, we're also told that Salusa Secundus is a hell world. Now, undoubtedly, now here we go. If you were going to raise tough, strong, ferocious men, what environmental conditions would you impose on them? How could you win the loyalty of such men? This is Leto talking. There are proven ways. Play on a certain knowledge of their superiority. The mystique of secret covenant. The esprit of shared suffering. It can be done. It has been done on many worlds and many times. Paul nodded, holding his attention on his father's face. He felt some revelation impending. And this is, but just very quickly, what we're talking, there's, we often talk about Herbert's attitudes. It's one of those things that comes up, actually, and it's Herbert's attitudes to homosexuality. And you're going, what's he talking about now? Because we're on the army here. It is particularly to do with his views on the army. And there's actually a lot of this, I think, when we get to the God Emperor. The certain knowledge of superiority. So you're the best. You're we're the elite of the elite. This kind of thing. You'll find this in real military regiments, etc. The mystique of a secret covenant. We've got our particular badges, our little logos, all of this kind of thing, and the esprit of shared suffering. It can be done. So it's about sort of building up these people a certain way, making them feel that they're superior, making them feel that they're special, and giving them mystery, secret covenants, all of this kind of thing, And the lesson continues. Paul's nodded here. This is one, holding his attention on his father's face. Consider Arrakis. When you get outside the towns and garrison villages, it's every bit as terrible a place as Salusa Secundus. And of course, we know, if we're familiar with this, that the Fremen have lived there. And I think that they were slaves on that planet for, I think, is it 9 generations? something like that. Now, so interestingly, I suppose, and we get the political balance, but we talked about the political balance before. Here's the military balance. The balance of our civilization remains the same. The military forces of the Landsraad great houses on one side, Sardaukar and supporting levies on the other. And I said we can. I think there's several models for the Sardaukar, SS, Roman legions, this kind of thing. More like, I suppose, arguably in construction, maybe a Roman legion, but behavior more like SS, I suppose. And in terms of the Roman, I suppose the emperor's levies, the Roman legions didn't operate on their own. I suppose they have what's called auxiliaries. So as much as a Roman legion's about 5,500 men, roughly. There's a whole chunk of other soldiers along with them, cavalry, cohorts, etc., etc. This is generally basically legions in themselves, but they're auxiliaries. So that kind of struck me as being similar with the Sardaukar plus their levies, if you see what I mean. So yeah, Arrakis is really bad, and we're about to see this. As I said, the interesting thing is, Silius Secundus is a hell world. It's about the environment being imposed upon you. You know, you can't create super tough people by raising them on a quite sunny, nice beachy planet or something. You know, whereas everything's relaxation and that kind of thing. As I've just made a wee note here, we're about to see a bit of Leto's real character here, I think. Here we go. So the Fremen. Yes, Paul's eyes went wide. The Fremen. We have the potential of a core as strong and deadly as the Sardaukar. It'll require patience to exploit them secretly and wealth to equip them properly. But the Fremen are there, and the spice wealth is there. You see now why we walk into Arrakis knowing the trap is there. Nope, I don't. But simply put, he's going to use these people, and this is the way the Atreides operate. The Fremen are there to be exploited. What we need is patience to exploit them and money so that we can equip them properly, and then we can have them go fight and kill Harkonnens and get killed by Harkonnens themselves, and we'll not be too bothered. But it's quite a blunt thing if you think about it. And as I said, I don't find Leto Atreides a particularly intelligent character. Not compared to the Baron, actually. I don't find him particularly compassionate, and everything about him is about appearances, I think. And as I said, his great plan's going to get everybody killed, and I don't think that making a few extra quid would do it, really. But it's about patience to exploit them. And he says, as I said, I've written here, you see why we go, and I've written, no, I don't. I can't fathom that. We're going to try and get a whole people and set them in war against the Harkonnen. There's something quite distasteful about it. And it's exploitative, isn't it? He wants to exploit these people. He does, after all, rule a planet full of people that he can exploit as well. So the potential of a core as strong and deadly, and of course, but the Fremen are there, and the spice wealth is there too. You see now why we walk into this. It's the wealth, isn't it? Really, we're doing it for money. Money will give us access to power, true power, if you like. Because as I said, I think at this point, Leto's job is, I think he wants to head for the throne, and it's not so much Paul putting, the Baron, I think, wants to put either probably Fade on the throne, not himself. He knows he won't rule. But I think Leto does actually want to rule. And we get a little bit more information again, as I said. So he basically just wants to exploit them. We get a little bit about how the Harkonnens have treated them. From, again, Paul's questions leads to more information. Don't the Harkonnen know about the Fremen? The Harkonnen sneered at the Fremen, hunted them for sports, never even bothered trying to count them. We know the Harkonnens' policy with planetary populations: spend as little as possible to maintain them. And the metallic threads in the hawk symbol above his father's breast glistened as the Duke shifted his position. You see? And we get a little bit more of Paul's insight. Yeah, we're negotiating with the Fremen right now, Paul said. And I sent a mission headed by Duncan, Idaho, the Duke said. Here we go, Duncan. A proud and ruthless man, Duncan, but fond of the truth. I think the Fremen will admire him. If we're lucky, they may judge us by him. Duncan the Moral. I don't know what you think of that one, guys. Cynthia says, I must go, thanks. As always, no problem, Cynthia. I've possibly missed you, but thank you very much for joining us, and thank you so much for your contribution tonight. It's been great. Brad says, that works well with the Wehrmacht support for the SS early on. Not so much later in World War II when there were other peoples who had SS bands for. Yeah, I think that I think it's very interesting the way that that's the one of all the planets that's abbreviated. It's SS. It's Solus Secundus, and that why abbreviate that one that way? And I think it's on the page. It's suggestive, isn't it? And yeah, I think there's a few kind of military sort of groups within the world like that, I think. But I'd go with the sort of model that they're kind of. You see, that would also make them suggestive that they're a bit Spartan, wouldn't it? That if you need really hellish conditions to develop really excellent soldiers, that brings the Spartans to mind, who are a pretty much unique culture within human society, I think. Sparta of a particular time, I suppose. I just thought the little hawk glistening at this point, I thought was an interesting. Why is our narrator drawing our attention to that? There is something hawkish about Leto. And this little passage starts with him talking about exploiting people, but ending with, I hope people will judge us by how they judge Duncan. We're moral. And the point is, if you're exploiting people, you're not moral, are you? It's an immoral thing, isn't it? So I think that's quite interesting to get a wee bit of insight from Paul. The way that this conversation sort of framed this bit, Paul gets it correct again, and we're going to find out why. But we get a little bit about Duncan here, and I think it tells us more about Leto than it does about Duncan, to be honest. But we're told Duncan's proud, ruthless, fond of the truth, honest. Okay. Being fond of the truth doesn't necessarily mean you use it all the time, but there we go. And the real hope, as I said, is that the Fremen will judge the Atreides by Duncan, and they call him Duncan the Moral. And I kind of, oh God, he sounds like a fun guy to have a night out with. Let's all hit the pub with Duncan the Moral, shall we? It's an appalling thing to call someone, I think. And of course, we bring this back in. So Duncan's been sent ahead, and he's already chatting with the Fremen. That's the little bit of intrigue we get. We haven't met Duncan yet, and at this point, where we're meeting Leto, he is the only one of Paul's teachers that we will have not met at the point where we leave to go to Arrakis. So all we get there: proud, ruthless, fond of the truth. This idea that Duncan the Moral, Paul said, and Gurney the Valorous. You name them well, the Duke said. And we get this little pop in from the previous discussion of the Reverend Mother about the 4 kinds of things a leader needs. And Paul thinks Gurney's one of those the Reverend Mother meant, a supporter of worlds, the valor of the brave. So Gurney the Valorous, Duncan the Moral. And it kind of sounds as if we're setting up these people to be certain types of companions, etc. We have a little bit of a chat actually, and the situation switches from Duncan, who we briefly mentioned here, and we go over to Gurney. Do Brad says House Atreides must have had spies on Dune to see the Fremen numbers, or they were walking into this from wishful thinking with no facts to support their dream. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of I think that when we call we call the Mentats masters of assassins, what they are is really spy masters. I think people who run information networks, this kind of thing, to do with the war of assassins, possibly the naming of the thing, but that's essentially what they are. So if Thufir has it, we have to assume that House Atreides has got enough spies in House Harkonnen and vice versa. But probably again, when Leto's coming into the room at the start here, looking about, it's probably because there's probably well aware of plenty of Harkonnen spies and House Atreides, etc. But yeah, they make them sound a bit like Knights of the Round Table or something, like Duncan the Moral, Gurney the Valorous, this kind of thing. Oddly enough, just chatting about Gawain and the Green Knight there. Yeah, Gawain's honest at the end, but he's not a good knight. You see, it's ultimately his honesty about being a shit person that makes him. That's his. That's what makes him noble. There is one thing that wasn't in the film actually. Is there's a tradition that forms out of I'll not spoil it for anyone, but the end of Gawain and the Green Knight creates a tradition that all the knights wear a certain thing. You see. And it's to do with Gawain. I think it's a very interesting story. I have to say, I love Gawain and the Green Knight. Just thinking about Monty Python and the Holy Grail there for a minute as well. A very different sort of thing there. But yeah, absolutely. If again, Duncan's gone ahead, but they would have had to have some kind of idea that there's a load of these people around. Duncan is the one later who gets all uptight about sexuality, moral, and he does actually. Yeah, I think Duncan goes, well. Of course, it's not. Duncan is going to go on a wee journey into death and back, I suppose. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I think some of I often talk about how much I love the God Emperor of Dune book, and a lot of the interactions between the God Emperor, who I suppose we're going back to the 80s for that book, but the God Emperor's a very forward thinker in some ways. And I suppose there's a discussion about Herbert's attitudes towards sexuality in these early books. If you take the Baron as a homosexual paedophile, Peter's described as effeminate, and when it comes to what he wants to do with Jessica, it's not sexual in that he just wants to torture her and find out how she ticks. There's a suggestion that Peter's homosexual as well, and of course the nature of being homosexual attributed with villainy is kind of that. I suppose some people, the thinking of it doesn't make a lot of people happy these days. That it's and I think it's one of the reasons why we've had a lot of the Baron's character cut. Simply put, everything's unacceptable about the Baron except that he's fat now, and he's just a fat bald guy. And if the Baron spoke, the Baron's not intimidating in any way anymore. He's just a big fat guy that floats and has nothing really that's really vile about him, evil, because the interesting thing, I suppose, is that in terms of how the Baron and Leto actually think quite a lot alike, politically and militarily. I think not obviously in terms of their sexual preferences, but they do think in a very similar way. So yeah, and of course, I've had a wee chat about this in my PhD and how it's been viewed over the years. But Frank's relationship with his son Bruce, who was gay, was quite complicated and didn't really go well initially. And if you have a wee read it, Frank, is it Dreamer of Dune, the biography of Frank Herbert by Brian Herbert. It has a wee good wee discussion about that section. Certainly, Herbert's ideas on homosexuality are generally based on his ideas of evolution and genetics, this kind of thing. And I don't think it was that Herbert didn't really see homosexuality as a bad thing, that the way homophobia would be perceived. He saw it as a genetic dead end. And if you think about this book in terms of genetics, then his attitudes to homosexuality aren't homophobic in that sense. Though I think he had a lot of issues with his son, and my understanding is they worked them out and and Herbert's attitudes mellowed a lot. By the time we get to God Emperor and Duncan doing all that stuff, we're 21 years later from the first writing of Dune, and 20 years will change anyone, you know. I felt that Piter was teasing the Baron over his proclivities rather than being himself homosexual. It's an interesting one. It depends on how you look at it, and you could go either way. But there's something about the Baron's. Let me see. Where are we? That'll be chapter 2. Hang on. Let's jump back here in my wee book. That's the whole point of this thing. There's the Baron being a paedophile right here. Let's see. On a wee bit. It's about when he talks about why he wouldn't get rid of him. Why he won't get rid of just yet, I think. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, there's a fair amount about his fat and the portable suspensors and stuff like that. Let me see. Bear with me a wee second. Yeah, it's something to do with them sharing tastes, isn't it? I think we did have a wee chat about it the last time, so we'll have a wee look on chapter 2. I don't want to sort of waste too much time trying to find specific little things in here. But yeah, and I actually think one of the strange things about the Baron is once he's done all his plotting, it's just food, you know. he just kind of reverts to that. So I just thought it's the language that Herbert uses, and he's not telling us everything, colleges and cannibals. So something that I inferred from what was said, but I got the idea that there was no sexual desire for Jessica at all. But yeah, could be. I don't know. The way things are going, soon that's Brad. You've gone where I was going to go. The way things are going, soon he shall not be fat, as rather than showing his gluttony, it'll be seen as fat shaming. Yeah. The level of Piter's camp and some Baron's interactions makes me think it's more art than habit. I also think he's quite mad as well. I think, that's the thing. Piter's a great character, and it'll be interesting to have a wee look at him, as I said, in this level of detail as we move along. But it's about paying attention to the words, I suppose, that Herbert uses to describe him, and pretty much there's sexual terms anyway, or effeminacy. Is that what do you say? What's he suggesting, or is there a reason why that description? If you see what I mean. And I certainly see the way we've seen Piter played on the screen. I don't think he's ever been played in an effeminate manner. Does that make sense? I don't think Brad Dourif played him that way. And is it David I don't know how to say this. The chap's name Dalmatian, is it? I didn't see enough of him on the screen, to be honest. It was, and I thought he actually kind of looked the part. I thought the look of Piter was pretty good in the new Dune film, and I just thought he was badly underused. A complete waste of an actor. Absolutely complete waste of an actor. I think he's teasing the Baron over his relationship with his nephew. Yeah, there's a couple of that. There's a bit of that too, I think, and I think we'll see a wee bit of that with the Fade as well. I think wanting to kind of how do we get away from the Baron? But we'll get to that wee bit in the detail. Just a wee point. As it doesn't say that he is that but it's one of those things that I thought it was suggestive. But they share. Well, I must get that wee quote actually for maybe the next time, just to remind us. Yeah, so you kind of get the sense of Duncan the moral, Gurney the valorous. It's a bit Knights of the Round Table, isn't it? And we get a little bit of a chat about Gurney, as I said here. I said that the valor of the brave, that's to do with the four things that a leader needs, isn't it? That the Reverend Gaius Helmoheim was telling Paul about in the previous chapter. Oh, sorry, yeah. And it's interesting some of the terms that the Duke laughed aloud. I figured Gurney to be sparse with his praise. He says you have a nicety of awareness, his own words, of the difference between a blade's edge and a tip. And it's tip, sorry. And Gurney says there's no artistry in killing with the tip, that it should be done with the edge. Gurney's a romantic, the Duke growled. And it's an appalling sort of conversation. If we have some of those kind of, if we're not into our violent sensibilities, the talk of killing, the Duke talk of killing suddenly disturbed him, coming from his son, as it should. Excuse me. I'd sooner you never had to kill, but if the need arises, you do it however you can, tip or edge. He looked up at the skylight on which the rain was drumming. Gurney presents killing in a romantic way, is how his father sees it. There and the kind of the idea that there's artistry in killing a human being, if you see what I mean. It's Gurney's thinking is not brilliant either, is it? The fact that yes, these people are teaching my son how to be a killer. Yeah, and I suppose it starts making us think about the Gom Jabbar test and all. If Paul was an absolute nut, psycho, a real evil little so and so, he's incredibly well trained, isn't he? But it's just interesting. Gurney's a romantic, and then because he's having a discussion about how best to kill somebody with tip or edge of a knife. It is knife, isn't it? That they say there. There's no artistry in killing with the tip. Blade's edge. Doesn't really mention whether it's a knife or a dagger. They're technically different weapons. So a knife's for cutting, a dagger's for stabbing. Excuse me. Originally, I suppose. Such a cozy trap, though. Leto seeks the big chair for his family, I suspect. Absolutely. But it'll be him that gets it, I think, and that's to do with him not marrying Jessica. It's about keeping that arranged marriage open. If it was all for Paul, sorry, I don't think it would matter. But again, this is also probably his thinking about why I must have a male son, as opposed to a female son. Female son, sorry, female daughter. Obviously, that's a good one. And of course, well, the framing and setting of the scene in the previous chapter comes in previous few chapters comes back in here, looking up to the skylight with the drum of rain upon it. And we get another little conversation here going, and really it's another little these lessons about the guild in this case. I thought some of this was kind of interesting, but basically it's like Paul follows the direction his father's gaze, sees him looking at the skylight, with the rain falling down, and his thoughts of skies put him in mind of the space beyond. And it's not really a segue, is it? Sky to space, but it kind of is. I thought it's a very well handled segue. Are the guild ships really big? He asked. And the Duke looked at him. This will be your first time off planet? He said, yes, they're big. We'll be riding a Highliner because it's a long trip. Highliner is truly big. Its hold will tuck all our frigates and transports into a little corner. Will just be a small part of the ship's manifest. I thought, really big. First time for Paul being off planet. But we're also interested that it takes time to travel there. I suppose a lot of people get the whole let's just fold space and pop through, probably from the David Lynch film, but these ships do actually have to travel. That's why Leto's going to get time for a bit of. I don't think it tells us how long. Maybe we'll have a wee nosy later on whenever they get there. But that's just a very. I just thought it was an interesting point. There, I went, you miss a couple of little sentences that you don't often think are kind of important. We'll be riding a Highliner because it's a long trip. There you go. And of course, we're told that everybody has to stay inside their ships. It's quite possible that the Harkonnens could be sitting right next to them in their ships, and that nobody's allowed to leave while in transport. So you hang around in your own ships, and they're transported inside the Guild Highliner. Yeah. Now, simply put, nobody's ever. This is one of these things here where there seems to be kind of one of these mutual agreements in place. No one will endanger their shipping privileges with the guild. If you do, basically, it effectively means you're cut off. Pardon me, from the rest of the universe, from trade and everything. So even the Harkonnens, we're told, won't violate this. It's part of the guild peace. We get to see. Listen, we get to find out a little bit about. Well, another mystery, I suppose, within Dune, and Paul's saying, "I'm going to watch our screens and try and see a guildsman." And again, there's still a bit of the teenage boy in him there. You won't, not even their agents, ever see a guildsman. The guild's as jealous of its privacy as it is of its monopoly. Do not do anything to endanger our shipping privileges, Paul. So again, just don't muck around here, son. Is what he's saying. But the guild guards to its privacy and its monopoly. And so why do the guild? It gets us to a little bit more about the guildsmen. A bit of curiosity, these mysteries in the Dune universe that the people who live there kind of must live with. Do you think they hide because they've mutated and don't look human anymore? Who knows? Said the Duke shrugged. It's a mystery we're not likely to solve. We have more immediate problems, among them, you. So it's as I was saying, I thought some of the writing didn't flow particularly well earlier. It's flowing again. If you see, there's nice little techniques that get the thing going a bit better. But I think we did have a bit of a stumble earlier on. Brad Rose says, in my book, it says one of those the Reverend Mother meant is Reverend, a real word. The Reverend, in my book, it says one of those the Reverend Mother meant. Oh, that'll be a typo. Yeah, a Reverina. No, that's a typo. Yeah, there's a couple. There's a thing, guys. So there's a couple of mistakes in Dune actually, and I think depending on which edition of the book you have, they're either corrected or not. I can't remember what it's about, but some people have done a wee bit of work on it. It's particularly one of the terms, one of these, is it a test? I think later on, and it is a misspelling. It's a misprint, but I don't think it's been updated. And I'm wondering I wonder if I could remember what it was offhand, but I must have a wee look into it again. See, it was something that people were pointing out on Twitter. Has your edition got this misprint fixed? And it changes the meaning quite importantly, I think, in reference to a real thing as opposed to some other thing. So no, I'll go with that being a typo where your D's probably just not descended, if you know what I mean, or ascended. Reverina Mother, yeah. So more immediate problems, more mysteries in this chapter. God, I thought we were done there, but we're not. And of course, this is where we find out something quite important. Paul's the problem here. And what, me? This kind of thing. And it sort of, would get your attention. Paul stared at his father. There's another stare from Paul, unable to speak for a moment. Then a man, so here we go. It's sorry, I jumped ahead a wee bit. Let me see. 54.55. There we go. So your mother wanted me to be the one to tell you, son. You see, you may have mentat capabilities. So this is quite an important thing. Paul's going to be a mentat. Of course, we have no mention of this at all in the new Dune movie. And I think it's an interesting little section. How it says it's true, basically. And then what I find is quite funny. I don't know what you guys think of this, but I actually think this is, there are funny little moments in Dune that are genuinely humorous, I think. And Howard agrees, son, it's true. And this is it here. But I thought mentat training had to start during infancy, and the subject couldn't be told because it might inhibit the early... he broke off, all of his past circumstances coming to focus in one flashing computation. I see. So, started in training in infancy, not being told... right. Yeah, I'm a mentat. And we get it explained to us. A day comes when the potential mentat must learn what's being done. Oh, sorry. Let me just go back up. So what we're told is that the training begins when the mentat's a child in infancy, and they're not told what it is because being aware of what it is will inhibit the early development of being a mentat. So this has been done to Paul, and he's oblivious to it. And being told this and then realizing it is actually part of coming to the awareness of being a mentat, as we say. And as we see, we have a day comes, the Duke said, when the potential mentat must learn what's being done. It may no longer be done to him. The mentat has to share in the choice of whether to continue or abandon the training. Some can continue, some are incapable of it. Only the potential mentat can tell this for sure about himself. And I just thought, that wee bit, so it's one of the, oh, right, that's been done to me. I just thought it was kind of funny, and I thought it was a good, nice wee moment there. Possibly, I must check up on this one, folks, but the mentat, and I suppose maybe by the time we get to the Bene Gesserit books, I'm not too sure. Have we listened to this and see what you think? When the potential mentat must learn what's being done, it may no longer be done to, and the word "to" is emphasized there. This will be page 50 my copy, but to him. And I was just wondering, is that again one of those times where we're a bit unsure about the use of a pronoun here? Does he mean Paul when he says him, or is the suggestion that mentats are only men? Or is it simply that, his thinking's that way because of the use of that word? I was just curious, and I'm trying to remember again. My memory, I keep pointing out my memory's a wee bit shoddy on the Bene Gesserit books because it's been a while since I read them, and I just put a wee question mark here. Are there no female mentats? Is that another male-centric thing? And of course, at this point, anyway, Paul has to make a choice. Does he carry on with this training or ditch it, basically? And we're told a wee bit about what it involves. The mental training of the mentats involves the use of mnemonics, a focus of their awareness, muscle control, sharpening of sensitivities, the study of language, and the study of the nuance of voice. And of course, Paul, he decides, I we'll go on with it. And of course, his father is saying, you will be the Duke someday, son. His father said, a mentat Duke would be formidable indeed. And can you decide now, or do you need more time? And there was no hesitation in his answer. I'll go on with the training. Formidable indeed. get that phrase repeated there. So the Duke murmured, and Paul, just to finish off this chapter, this is the interesting wee bit, I think. But Paul will be a Mentat Duke, and it's to do with just his father here. The Duke murmured, and Paul saw the proud smile on his father's face. The smile is the main feature of Leto that we keep referring to. The smile shocked Paul. It had a skull look on the Duke's narrow features. Paul closed his eyes, feeling the terrible purpose reawakened within him. Perhaps being a Mentat is a terrible purpose, he thought. But even as he focused on this thought, his new awareness denied it. So there we go. The terrible purpose back alive, reawakened. And of course, the last little thing that we find out in this chapter is maybe trying out a bit of this new awareness, wondering, is this being a Mentat? Is that what this terrible purpose, this thing that I feel is? And his terrible purpose goes, no, it's not that. And I just thought, again, there's a bit of, depending on how you think about it, a wee bit of humour there, folks, But there we go. So another chapter with Paul spending a bit of time with his father. And I don't know. I sort of, there's things about Leto that seem okay, and there's other things that don't. But the bit that I suppose from a Dune point of view, if we pay attention to the lessons in the epigraphs, and I think it's worth noting what do we see at the start of each chapter and what's happened by the end of it. The epigraph, of course, the bit that we're really meant to understand here is when Irulan says, "What is the son but an extension of the father?" Really, the most damning thing in this, I think, for Leto, I'll just read it one more time to you, just to recap, is it's that point about patience. We have there the potential of a core as strong and deadly as the Sardaukar. It'll require patience to exploit them. Patience to exploit them secretly, and wealth to equip them properly. Money, patience to exploit these people, and they're going to use them. And of course, Leto's never going to get round to it, though he wants to set it. He's basically in the setting up of the machinations of it all. But Paul will do that, I think, and that's the interesting. By the end of this, Paul seems to be, we could exploit them, the friend. He's listening to his father, learning from his father. Excuse me. What is the son but an extension of the father? And that's exactly what they do. That awareness of how to exploit. So it's a very telling. I think there's enough little things there. And I said we don't learn an awful lot about Leto, but he's happy to exploit people. He's sounds like a military man playing politics, which is never a good thing. I think. And I just again, the terrible purpose, this sense of foreboding, and we're going to jump from this point. Really, our next chapter is going to be on Arrakeen, Piles and Corners of the Arrakeen Great Hall. Quite interesting, leave it. So it's we're starting to take off, and we'll actually, at this point, we spent 5 chapters really on Caladan, and 1 chapter on Gidi Prime. There you go, folks. If you have any questions or anything like that, that's me. That's us through that chapter. Or any wee comments. I think it's a good wee chapter. There is a wee bit of, I think a bit of fluff with the writing. It just, I think it jars a wee bit. Just earlier on when we were discussing it, but I think it certainly sorts itself out by the end of it. I think it was just that little interaction. I was going to point out something I didn't point out at the very start of the chapter. There, we were just talking about Leto. The descriptions there, devotion with which men served him. He was a man snared by destiny, and just it's a good link into the Oedipus myth and all of this kind of thing. As I said, we were having a wee chat about Leto as well, that the gender version of this, mother of the divine twins, Artemis and Apollo. And yeah, I suppose one way of thinking about it is that Leto's children, in this case, it's going to be Paul and Alia. Paul's representing Apollo, Alia will be Artemis. Interestingly enough, Artemis is the firstborn twin. They are going to slaughter an awful lot of people's children, and it's ultimately really all because of what Leto, their daddy, wanted for them, I suppose. It's an interesting thing. But the idea, of course, that Leto is his father's skull, just seeing the smile, that kind of the laughing skull, the death's head kind of thing. Death's head grin. Isn't that what they call it? There's quite a lot there. And so we've learned that he's a mentat. And he's been trained in all sorts of this thing. Hopefully our hero will be a bit, he sounds like he's going to be quite a dangerous individual. Because we know he is. But in terms of just immersing ourselves into the book, and working along, I think it's not a bad wee chapter. And we almost have we've got a fair chunk of our universe fleshed out at this point. We've talked about Chong, the guild. We've got the main political groups and families, the houses. And we've got the economy, pretty much with Melange and how that kind of works. And everything has been teased out up until this point through lessons, because that's kind of and even when we go to Peter and the Baron, it's about sort of bringing young Fade into the fold and teaching him a bit of this as well. So I think it's very, very good. Bojack Hart's just said, "Hey all, Bojack, we're just about to finish up here." I'm so sorry, but thanks very much for joining us. We pop it up online anyway, but I hope you're keeping well. And yeah, how are we doing tonight then? 20 to 12. Almost over for today, I think. Summertime, pretty much. My wee eyes, that you probably can tell, are very, very sleepy. Because my sleep disorder has been kicking me in the head the last couple of days. So I've been awake at such odd times that I decided to do a flip, what I call a flip. So if you can probably tell, my eyes are, oh dear. Yeah, could do with a break. Oh, there, that's better. But yes, indeed. And I said we're about to shift to Arrakis now. But I think the main thing is the only one really that we haven't seen is Duncan. In terms of all the tutors of Paul, each one of them brings something to the party, don't they? And in the sense that we're trying to get a measure of our hero here. Herbert's not only trying to build his world up, got a lot of world building to do here, but he's really trying to imprint upon us a sympathetic view of Paul. And from my point of view, he does it very well here through the father, because Leto, as much son, I love my son and all this stuff, he's not around much. Depends on how you look at fatherhood, etc. But the way he's brought up his son, for this word again, it doesn't have to be. And the life that a child has at 15 years of age, no friends, being taught how to kill, this thing, then being told you're a human computer and all of this stuff, it must be quite heavy, knowing that you have mortal enemies out there and that your father has done nothing to stop all this. That it seems that the Atreides are quite happy to have mortal enemies and things like that. That these feuds that go on and on, nobody's ever decided to try and put a stop to them. I don't know. So it's and he's a man who hires people for assassinations, has a master of assassins in his employ, hires ruthless killers to train his son, and is making a power grab for the throne and wants to completely exploit a set of people on a planet. I don't think he's much of a nice guy, to be honest with you. I think it's meant. Oh, here, that was a fatal error, Brad. Right there. I took my glasses off, so now I can't see. Hang on, I forgot people are still communicating. Brad says, I think it's meant to be stunted, not fluid, as the Reverend Mother put a caveat on Paul's ability to communicate some of his ideas to his father. Yes, yeah, that's a good point. It is. I thought what he blurted out there was not quite. The Reverend Mother. Put it this way: I think what the Reverend Mother's done to him is trying to prevent him from saying, "For the father, nothing. Your father's dead." Or that, hey, anything to do with Dad, they're all telling me you're going to die, and they've foreseen it. And if you know what I mean, surely that with that alter Leto's ability, but he might not go. It's a question of what would you do if you can't see the future, or predict it, if you know what I mean. And yeah, again, that you'll get this idea that prediction is death, isn't it? It's a very good point. Yeah, and as much as I know what you're saying, it is just a bit of the dialogue there, but I'm not too sure if it's that. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, and yeah, I think that's another mystery in the book, though, isn't it? How has still, I think we talked a wee bit about how has Mohiam done this, and it must be somehow subtly within tone, and we would have to hope that it's whenever Jessica's not in the room. Otherwise, but we get a sense of this. What's being done to Paul will be done to Fade later, there's literally a word that Paul can use at the end of the Dune, right at the point of action, where if he's in danger, all he's got to do is say a word, and Fade's paralyzed, and it's been implanted in there. So it's probably some kind of undertone hypnotic suggestion or something. But yeah, it's and I don't know, in terms of how we've met Leto, the build up for him it's a bit anticlimactic, I think. The man, the ledge, Leto, can't wait to see him. Is he here? No, he'll be along shortly. We've been left in a lot of suspense over him. But yeah, I don't know if he comes across that well or not, but it's just my opinion. I don't think he does. There we go. So Joseph saying, thanks again, Doc. Catch you on Sunday. Yes, Joseph, thank you very much. And yeah, I'm going to wrap it up, folks, because I'm tired and my throat's going a wee bit. And but yeah, thank you very much. Everybody's got really good contributions today, and I think we've really, really some insightful stuff from a lot of you there. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. Excuse me. And I said, we'll probably be popping on tomorrow night for a bit of another non-June stuff, all just our science fiction Friday. And then again, yeah, we'll see us again at 9 o'clock on Sunday GMT as we arrive on Arrakis. Dark Room and audiobook. Happy days. Yeah, that's. I'm going to listen to a wee bit of Old Harry. Old Harry's games, my thing for this evening, I think. But yeah, no worries, guys. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bojack. Thanks all very much for joining in today. It's been a great one. Actually, it's gone very well. So as usual, folks, I will say, no matter where you are, look after yourselves, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you the next time. And all the very, very best. Thank you very much for joining me. Take care. Bye bye now. Do 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 do.